All right, everybody, welcome to Mission Critical Podcast. If you are watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, and in all sincerity, we say it every time and we really mean it, you are the resistance. So thank you for being here whenever that here is. You are the resistance. And we're going to kind of jump right into this as part two of a two-part episode titled, Are We Already at War? And so me, Mark, and then this other guy. Well, I always do it the wrong way over there.
Redbeard.
Boom. We're your hosts. And then down here, what was that game show, by the way, where it was it Hollywood Squares? And then tonight's Hollywood Square special, category. Yeah, there it is right there. Hi, David. All right, David, why don't you tell DB, what is your thing? Non-suspicious form. I like it. I love it already. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself in case they haven't caught you in one of our other episodes.
Yeah, you could trust me. Basically, as I say in every episode, I'm a former teammate of Mark's. We used to do a lot of road trips into the desert together, all kinds of fun stuff, coming up with crazy ideas in the hours that it takes to go from point A to point B in the big desert. But, that kind of stuff.
The capitalist caliphate, baby.
Yeah, this is where we came up with the capitalist caliphate to counter all the other caliphates that were developing in the region at the time, set up ours, make some money, have a nice little resort on the coast.
I'd be scuba diving for squid right now.
Absolutely.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Minor missed opportunity, boys.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, everything kind of took a turn for the worse, and it still never got any better, but hey, David, I always ask you to make this plug. Could you please just tell everybody just a little bit more about your Reno Dads? What do you want to call that? Your Reno Dads. It's not a group. I mean, well,
it's more of just so I am the founder and owner of Reno Dads. It's a social media organization set up in Reno, Nevada, where I'm located, that we kind of communicate, talk about what it's like to be a dad, go through our experiences. What works for me doesn't necessarily work for the next guy. So we don't give advice. We just provide, this is what I did in this situation and you're welcome to try it. And this is what this guy did in that situation. And you can see what works best for your parenting style. So we don't provide advice. We just provide our experiences, and those experiences help other dads in the area, especially the ones with the younger kids who are like, what the hell is going on? I got this crying blob of life just screaming all the time, and I don't know how to deal with it. Or it could be older kids or looking for sports resources in the area, all the way to marital issues. So we set up this organization to where at times up to 15 of us would, write a monthly article about a subject that we have some level of expertise or some level of experience in. And that's basically what our organization was set up to do. Just give fathers resources with the idea that being present, being active is the most important thing a child could have in their life to have a father. Every single statistic out there that's negative, from dropouts to drug abuse, alcohol abuse, prison, incarceration rates, all kinds of crime rates, can be there's a correlation with all those dudes. It's like 60 to 70% of them don't have a father figure in their life. Dad left them a long time ago. So our goal, we don't expect to change that. We expect people to at least not get frustrated and give up. They could keep fighting. They could keep trying. They could keep being involved in their children's life. And that's kind of the goal, broad, but.
Yeah, but that's a pretty damn good goal. Seriously. Yeah. And I know you don't always kind of plug it. And that's why, when we do have you on, I always want you to say it, because I think it's pretty awesome what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's badass. And kind of to, in a weird way, that is the exact antithesis, the opposite. It's not a threat to our country, our culture, our way of life. Mm-hmm. But what we're going to talk about tonight is, these events that have been taking place that I unfortunately think many people aren't talking about, and they are a direct threat to our culture, our way of life, our democracy. Let's be honest. See, I just stumbled into the trap. Our constitutional republic. I'm sorry, Redbeard. That is,
wow.
That's another thing right there, though. But seriously, so let's just start off right there. and that this was totally unintended, as most of our conversations are in these podcasts. You know, we have a direction, we know what we want to kind of the bullet points we want to get to, but that just came in. Even language. So I apologize to Redbeard and David. I'm just kind of throwing this in right now. Just look at how language is being used and how language is being subverted for what I would argue evil designs, right? So before we get into the meat of this, let's just talk about that real quickly. And I just proved that point. I just fell victim to it. We're not a democracy, and I damn well know that, right? And you, the viewer, the listener, you know it too. Or maybe you don't, because we've been spoon-fed it and force-fed it so long. No, we are a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. You don't ever want to be a democracy. Redbeard, I'm kind of teeing you up right there because this is really going down your line or your lane. So what say you to that comment right there, sir? Is language being subverted for an evil purpose?
Well, I think that through history, you can see many different, authoritarian complexes, if you will, or authoritarian structures, or however you want to, kind of tee it up. One of the biggest things is being able to change the language of a population, whether that is by way of slowly subverting it or furthermore weaponizing it. Now, I think they both play hand in hand, right? If you subvert a language, you're slowly but surely trying to change it, but at the same time, when you subvert that language, you need to weaponize the language you don't want by way of, oh, you said this, so now we can take you to jail for saying this, or you said that, and we don't like that, so that requires you to lose your job, or whatever the case might be, or becoming entirely blacklisted. And I think as this conversation is going to take ahead, I'll build a picture, I think, for everybody as to what my thoughts are of who we really are at war with. Because in my opinion, it's not going to come from external. It's going to be from internal. But internal issues do give way to external problems, albeit they're not the primary issue. But I digress. Language is important. Language is important culturally. It's important legally. It's important in everything that we do in being able to effectively communicate. When you can break that down and set the parameters and more or less the barriers of what you can and cannot say, it will start to further carry over to dictate actions. So I'm going to leave it there, and then I'll elaborate further down the road.
David, again, unscripted, and we've said this many times, but I kind of always feel the need to say it. Like, really, we know what we want to say in the grander scheme of things, but this isn't a scripted podcast. If you want a scripted podcast, I mean, well, hell, if you want a polished podcast, you might need to go someplace else anyway. But we're in
the business of polishing turds, I think.
Yeah, there it is. So, David,
turds.
what do you think? Because, and I guess I think I just now realized I brought that up because of Reno Dads and what you're doing over on Reno Dads. Whether you know it or not, you are taking active measures to combat these other forces that are trying to break and wear down the foundation of who we are as a society and who we are as a culture. So these aren't as sexy of comments, or this isn't as sexy of a subject as something that's more kinetic or direct action. But I mean, you are taking active measures to help try to preserve the fabric that's going to keep that structure together.
Yeah, and the language thing's an interesting point because, like a lot of things, and you've heard me say it before, it's that old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and it starts out with trying to protect certain people, class of people, and we go out there, not we, because it's obviously not us, but people go out there and say we need to be more aware of our language and how it's used. So something as simple as, how did we used to sit when we crossed our legs? What is that called, guys? Come on.
Yeah.
Indian style, right?
Indian style.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were just looking for, like, it's called, I don't know, sitting. It's just
so something. If I said Indian style to anybody in our country, they would know exactly what we're talking about. It's a pretty common thing, and that's not how could that possibly be offensive? If they're sitting around, I'm on the ground. That's how they're sitting. Like, if you go to the Middle East, they squat or something, right? Like,
and Asians sit very differently, as well. Yeah, exactly.
Well, sloths just squat, so.
In Japanese, they sit on the ground too. Like,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how uncomfortable it is to have an entire meal of many courses sitting your ass on the ground. Like I wasn't even that old, and it still is just uncomfortable. We're not used to it. But saying the word Indian style. So my boys, all the kids in our area use the term crisscross applesauce. And it's like, okay, whatever. I get it. But it makes no sense to change language that isn't really bad for anybody. I mean, I'm here in Nevada. We have tons of Native Americans. I don't know a ton of them, but no one's ever had an issue with some of these things. In fact, it always allows us, when we play Cowboys and Indians, when we play as kids, we're growing up, we're learning about not just the Cowboys, but the Indians. We're learning about our heritage. And I'm in the Old West in Nevada, so maybe this plays a little bit different role in our lives, but something like Indian style, that language is being removed. And it goes all the way up to things we're seeing today, how we can't refer to women as women. We have to, and we're only attacking women now. You know, they're child-bearing people or birthing people. Like, I can't even think of all the terms. I just know that it's very clear that there's no one's changing anything about men, right? They're not changing it to this is I don't even have examples because it's not really happening. It's very clearly attacking women, childbearing women, menstrual people who menstruate. Like they're using language to attack. It's no longer used to protect. Even if I don't agree that Indian style is used to protect, at least we could agree that there was some sort of intention behind it that wasn't used like it is today, which is to attack. And language is a fascinating subject.
Yeah, and not to go too far down the linguistic side, and you know, but just look, and there's people. Matter of fact, and Jeremy, I'm even just thinking of Steven right now. I mean, like he's pretty much like this is clearly something that he gets into, and he knows a lot about about linguistic. I'm not saying he speaks 11 different languages. He understands language and how language is used and how language, the root terms and where these words come from and their meanings. And then, so bringing this back over to David, it's like we can't even, language is being so destroyed right now. So again, the argument is, are we at war? Well, I think look around you, and we're just taking one of the smallest and what might seem the most, banal or, or not unimportant of the categories or the arenas in which we're fighting.
Benign, if you will.
But that's exactly it. Because if we can no longer actually speak truth to words, if we can't use words, if words no longer have any meanings, again, the whole 2 + 2 = potato thing is back on the table right now as well. Other people are trying to say, again, we're back to math is racist, and and how do we, and an actual human being, adult human beings are trying to say, well, that's all a matter of perspective. How do we know that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5? I'm like, holy Jiminy Christ, it's like it's really out of control. So maybe that's a nice little non sequitur, kind of falls outside the parameters of what we want to talk about, but it's still, so I guess it's not really a non sequitur, but it still kind of segues into, hey, are we at war? So we just brushed over language a little bit, and David gave a great example. So we are at war. I mean, and why? So here, before I go into my examples and finally get to start to lay out my actual, kind of argument on, I think we are at war. I think the premise though has to be prefaced with if you're fighting the last war, and this is an old trite, kind of old, hackneyed saying, if you're fighting the last war, you're going to lose, right? That's like, the prevent defense, right? Like it only prevents win. I used to call it the prevent win, we're going to do prevent, like that's the prevent win defense right there, dude. You're going to lose the game with that type of strategy. And every team that ever did that, Minnesota Vikings were notorious for it back in the 90s. And that's when I stopped watching football because of exactly this, but that's exactly it. If we go down these roads, how are we going to, if we can't even define certain things, again, look at Matt Walsh and What is a Woman? And just look at the craziness, in response to that. And just even look at some of the crazy comments that people he was interviewing in that film are making. all the way back to David's things. Language is being attacked. Language is being destroyed. Because if we don't, because then it allows us to never have a unified, shared, agreed upon, or shared sense of whether it's proportionality or, is that really a toaster? Is that really a refrigerator? Is that really a dog? Is that really a man? Is that really a woman? So once that starts getting broken down, we as a society, we start losing our way. And then to the point I'm about to make, and that makes it much easier for penetrations or other types of events to transpire that normally shouldn't, that normally should have been easily repelled, easily just kept at the gates. Like, no, that's not true. Men cannot have periods. And see, for me even saying that, again, I don't know if we'll get any hate mail for that, but that is not a contentious statement. Yet, for some reason, it is today in our society. Yeah. So we're not fighting the war of World War II or even Vietnam or even Gulf War or Gulf. We're not. That war is over. If you think that's what warfare looks like going forward, well, you've already probably lost. So, gentlemen, before I go into it any deeper, on that comment right there, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think.
Oh, go ahead, Redbeard.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think when it comes down to words, I actually had an interesting conversation today. But first, I want to address something real quick, Mark, specifically to what you were saying. I feel like there's this taboo, if you will, that we have this ingrained idea of like, good guys are on the defensive, right? Like the good guys, like you don't ever attack, or whatever. You don't have to go on the offensive, or whatever which way, some of these white knights might come striding in here on their horse. But look, in the end of the day, why does going on the offense on something that you're trying, like sometimes the best defense is going on the offense. You just need to understand when to do it and for how long to do it. And on many of these issues that we're going to talk about today, we have to start going on the offensive. We can't just sit here and wait for somebody to do this for us. We can't sit here and just be like, oh, we're going to cast a ballot to do this and this guy's going to get in and he's just going to solve all of our problems. No, like it's not how it works. But by way of language, they've made it seem as if, the only way that we can retain our morality and our goodness or our good nature is if we take a defensive posture and then, like you said, a prevent defense, right? Like, okay, but at what point do you start taking ground back? And on that note, Mark, I had a conversation today amongst myself and some other family members, and it was, like, look, like you have to be willing to, defend yourself if trouble comes to the home front, which requires the use of violence. And violence it's become a dirty word, and I don't understand why it has become a dirty word. I feel like it's become tarnished because it's been utilized so much and usurped in its meaning by those who are trying to control a narrative. And it's like, no, look, like there's no way that you're going to be able to defend yourself, whether verbally or physically, without using violence. If you're not, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, and I don't know if you gentlemen will agree with me, but yes, you should be diplomatic. Yes, you should understand how to have basic diplomacy skills and being able to talk. But when that breaks down, if you're not capable of utilizing some form of violence in order to defend yourself, your family, your friends, your homestead, or whatever, then you've already lost. So violence can be used for a good purpose, but it can also likewise be used for a negative purpose. And it all comes down on what foot you land on and what you're trying to do. So, but you see that contortion of language being manipulated. Oh, violence is bad. Under what premise? Have good people never used violence for the sake of others? I would argue that we see it quite a bit. Statistically, the numbers and data are there.
So on that point, and rolling it over to David, and Jeremy, I know you and I have probably said this in our personal conversations, but look at any moment in history. and show me where a moment in history, a sea change is taking place where it didn't involve violence. Show me where the United Nations or the League of Nations or somebody else actually made an outcome. Like, I mean, you could kind of say the Berlin Wall and the whole Cold War, but as David, I'll use that to punt it over to you. You and I both know that there was a shit ton of violence behind the scenes, whether it was direct or indirect. Yeah. So David,
anybody that's done research can see that. So,
well, yeah, exactly. Unless we, 2 + 2 = potato, and we don't even talk about that, right? All right, David.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned violence being bad. So raising 2 boys, I could tell you that it's in their nature. It's in all of men's nature to be competitive, to be aggressive. Competitiveness and aggressiveness tends to become more violent, right? More dangerous, more risk-taking behaviors. And all of these things are being suppressed in schools. It's under the nature of, yes, we don't think people should be going around bullying kids, but we're taking it to the extreme, right? To where there is no competitiveness, there is no aggression out on the football field, at the playground, right? So boys, and this is targeted at boys. This is trying to neuter them to an extent to where they cannot let their inner nature come out. They're told basically these are bad behaviors. These are behaviors that are not acceptable in society. And when we see you being competitive, when we see you being fierce out there and trying to score a touchdown, and you're aggressive and you're just playing harder than, the girls over there who are more social minded, right? Like, it goes back to the idea men are interested in things, women are interested in social things, right? So other people. And you just see what you were mentioning about how violence is looked at as bad. Yes, of course, violence has a tendency to be bad. But if we look at the other aspects of violence, competitiveness, aggressiveness, those kind of aspects, those are being removed. Our boys are being indoctrinated to believe that is bad, that those things are not something, they're not ideals to strive to. That's that toxic masculinity. These overly aggressive boys, these overly competitive boys, these boys who are just too much of risk takers when it comes to literally every single activity, from sharpening pencils to playing on the playground. Boys will make it dangerous and risky. It's just, it's in our nature over generations. And I mean, thousands and thousands of years of our evolution. It's just in our nature. And it's one of those things that people are starting to get away from actual science when we start talking about evolution and how things evolve to be certain ways. But that language is what is being used against that. I'm seeing it personally at our level. And my boys play football and baseball, basketball, wrestle. They did jiu-jitsu for a while. They are extremely competitive, extremely fierce. Like, this is what they do. They take stupid risk because they're kids, right? They don't, this is in their nature though, and having to accept it rather than try and neuter it, trying to indoctrinate them to thinking their nature is bad. You look at why, and I mean, not to preach about this whole subject, but if you look at school grades now, how much kids, boys in particular, are not doing as well in school anymore. They don't want to be in school anymore. They're getting in more trouble in school. They can't sit in the classroom because they have no outlet to let that energy out, that competitive energy. They have no outlet they don't want to stand around and talk. They want to go stand around and play and run. And there is absolutely a difference between boys and girls. I'm not saying it's 100%, but, generally speaking, these things are facts. And so, if we look at it internally, as you say, if this war might come up from internally, we already see ideas like this indoctrinating certain viewpoints and certain values that, boys are being disregarded as their nature is bad and their value becomes bad. Boys and men's suicide rates are through the roof because they're a devalued part of the society.
Yeah.
And where do you think that starts? It literally starts on the playground, where society is now telling them that what's inside them is not valuable, that it is bad, that it's wrong, but it's in their nature. So they can't just change. I mean, the boys who are no longer competitive, they probably weren't competitive in the first place, and that's fine. But there's so many more who are competitive who have no outlet for that now because that is bad. So, I mean, that's what I'm seeing literally at my level in suburban Reno, Nevada, raising 2 boys. I know.
Oh, you're Mark. You're muted, Mark.
You're muted.
Hey, just a quick update. And then for everybody watching. So, just like when we were trying to do the first episode, we had some kind of logistical issues that kind of trouble us. Unfortunately, we've had some issues here today too. I kind of almost want to read the text. So one of our guests was stuck in a skiff all day doing IIRs. And if you're in the know, you know what that is. And then I had a joke about, that's what she said. And then our other guest, Triple X, isn't as badass as we all think, because apparently he's got some kind of bug and we all made a joke like, well, hang on, why can't he just do that from the bathroom? And David, can you mimic that real quickly? What you were pretending? Yeah, he could be on the toilet.
Dude, Mark, you have the skills to use the black bar if needed. It's not like we couldn't do that. So.
Well, hey, but now just we're going to get a surprise guest here in a couple minutes. So when David was talking, no one be offended, but because we're really focusing on language, and it's immediately made me think of a guest that we have who's just a freaking encyclopedia of knowledge about language and words and the roots and all that. So he's going to be making a spot appearance here in about 10 or 15. So I got to just go offline real quickly and send him the info. But Redbeard, before I do that, and I'm not asking you to carry that, because I could go in and make my argument too. But I saw you kind of responding to David there. And by the way, David, dude, I'm going to throw you under the bus here a little bit. You're like, oh, I'm not really sure, how much dude, you've been carrying this whole freaking conversation so far. What are you talking about, man? You're like
I happen to know
and it's a great unexpected
segue. You guys are teeing it up. That's all.
Yeah. Well, no, but you're bringing in the things that Redbeard and I can't bring in. We don't have the kids. We don't have that same experience that you have. That our mindsets might be very similar, but you've got more to add to that. So I mean, don't ever sell yourself short there, brother. I mean, but Redbeard, I saw you kind of chiming in.
Well, there's and I can actually segue this because it does make sense, especially as it pertains to the conversation of wording and David made a great point about boys. Like when I grew up, we always played cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians, or we used to roll around on the ground all the time and wrestle and nobody thought anything of it. And I'm looking at your ticker on the bottom and think about it, right? Like the ticker that you have on the bottom right now, Mark, it says that it is the privilege of every citizen and one of his most essential rights to bear arms and resist every attack upon his liberty or property by whomsoever made. Now, in the end of the day, I don't know about you guys, but I think this is a good segue into, as men, at least specifically, does not that roughhousing, does not that mild use of violence that we use growing up, does it not prepare us to defend our property, our rights, our families? Is that not how it is, intertwined in our beings? To do these things so that we may be able to deal with threats using whatever tools we deem necessary to better give us an advantage, right? Like we want to talk about language. We'll look at the language they use to try and destroy a person's right to bear arms, an essential right to provide a defense. Why would they want to do that? Why would they want to strip away your ability to defend. Why would they want to take away any of this? Because look, an unarmed, docile people are much easier to force and coerce and submit to whatever it is you want to do. So language and the practical application aspect of violence and the threat of violence by the average person is far more of a threat than any opposing country, because the government knows that we are a check and balance. And I guess that's where I'm going to be going with this, Mark. And you knew this was going to come up. I foresee and I feel, based off of what I have deducted over several years, that our greatest threat is internal, and it's going to come from the apparatus of the government itself. And it's already here. There's no reason that they want to change language, that they want to take firearms away, that they want to intertwine themselves in the medical industry, in the education sector, in all of these different things. There's no reason that they want to overwhelmingly control this for anything other than the fact that they want you docile and submissive. And
to that point, that as you just said that made me just think about, like, again, I just even fell victim to this. I call this a democracy. It is exactly to that point. So, the other nice little thing about this, and I hope this is the same for anybody watching or listening, is this conversation with these two gentlemen just helped me open up my mind, right, and explore this from a perspective I hadn't considered before. I'm not saying I'm a linear thinker. I'm not saying that, but I'm going to acknowledge the fact that I have a certain type of background, and that does influence how it paints a different color on the lenses of my glasses, and I look at things a little bit differently because of that. But, the failure of that is what we're talking about right now. I totally failed to consider the simple fact that how language has been subverted. It's probably one of the most effective tools in the war we currently are in. So maybe kind of getting into this. We are at war right now. In my mind, there is no doubt about it. We are at war. It's just not the traditional kinetic war when you're thinking World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf Wars, that kind of stuff, or even the forever wars. That's still much more kinetic, right? And, even though we've tried using hearts and minds, since, JFK, the whole, special forces creation, back in the 60s, this isn't a hearts and minds. I mean, it's the exact opposite of hearts and minds. David, I see you kind of smiling. I think you know where I'm going with this. It's like, hey, somebody's taken that whole hearts and minds, what David and our backgrounds, how we kind of looked at it, and used those same skills, and is going in using it for nefarious, evil reasons. Like, here's where I've just got to throw a quick story. Here's where I'm going with this. So when I was in the agency, again, you see David's little thing, non-suspicious former CIA guy, right there. But, when I was in the agency, and we're trained in this, right? And again, I'm not an evil person. I know some people would say, well, once a spy, always a spy. I'm a man. I'm a human being. I can mature. I can grow. I can succeed. I can fail. I can, do good things. I can fuck things up. But when I was in the agency, at least through my class going through the farm, and in the groups that I worked in, we had a thing. You never try to case officer an American. You don't use your skills against citizens, right? You're taught some things that are, I'm going to agree with you, that are potentially borderline, malicious, evil, however you want to phrase it. But you've got to know those skills, because to what we're kind of saying, because there's different cultures, and you've got to learn these cultures, and you've got to understand how these cultures work and think. And then you've got to be able to get into that mindset of this other person, not to kill them, right? That's easy to do. I hate to say it. Dropping a bomb, pressing a trigger, that's not the difficult thing, right? Matter of fact, and one quick little side story, a sergeant major from, Delta, right? We're not supposed to say that name, but, we all know who they are. He said, hey, teaching somebody how to shoot is easy. Teaching somebody how to think, that's the real difficult thing. That's the real thing that you really strive for in life, is teaching somebody how to think. And I think that, on a little plug, I know Redbeard and I, and David too, I'm not speaking for anybody, but I know that's what we're trying to accomplish with these conversations, with this podcast. So bringing that back full circle, you never try to case officer an American, right? You never, because they're your countrymen, your fellow citizens. You don't do that. You do that kind of Jedi bullshit, against somebody, so they see the light and hopefully help us, make the world a better place and save American lives. However you want to phrase that. And so, so bringing that up, I mean, David, you see where I'm kind of going with that? I saw you smile, and that's why I kind of went down that road. Is that what you were thinking? Or because that's not what we're trying to do, but.
Yeah. I mean, it does remind me of one fun little thing I remember in the place where we were at. I can't even remember what it was specifically, but you get a name off the streets, you plug it into the system to be like, all right, is this somebody important? What do we have on him, etc. And it popped up U.S. citizen, and everybody was like, oh, hit the X. No one even bothered to no one cared. And that's when I truly believe there are good people out there. And the guys who did this weren't even your favorite people, but it tells you that underlining everything that we did, we saw the U.S. citizen, and we didn't read any further. We immediately went up to hit X and disregarded that contact, and we're just like, whatever, he's out. Has nothing to do with us. We want nothing to do with him. We want to respect the fact that he is a citizen. We don't go after those guys without, I'm sure there's those special processes and procedures, but we weren't looking for that. We were just seeing who this guy was, what he was all about. For whatever reason, his name was there, but once we saw that he was a U.S. citizen, so that just ties in with your story right there. We don't really.
Well, but so that's how we are, right? You and I were from that era that we didn't do that kind of stuff, but I kind of get the sense, we're talking about we're at war. There's some evil people who, again, went to the dark side of the Force. There's a bunch of Anakin Skywalkers out there who I kind of think I'm starting to realize that now. I think I was a little bit too, I had a little bit too many blinders on, or my again, we were just talking about this in the pregame. First time I jumped out an airplane, I saw the equivalent of looking through a soda straw. It wasn't after until I had multiple jumps that I actually started, being able to see things and appreciate and understand and have a more fuller understanding and acknowledge. And matter of fact, I think it was David that said, yeah, and that's the point where you weren't listening to the wind anymore, and or your canopy. You could actually start blocking that out. The more experience you had. It seems to me that I may have overlooked something. So yeah, we're at war, and there's probably some evil forces, some evil individuals who have these same type of skills in this training, and who have gone to the dark side. And because tying this into a loop on the language side, it's clearly being used against us. And I just now, through this conversation with these two great human beings in this podcast, I just now suddenly feel like I just had like a wool was lifted over my eyes, and I'm like, oh shit, I forgot this, and I didn't look at that, or I didn't consider that. But it is another indicator that yes, we're at war. Shit. I don't want to make a comparison to any Jedis. I'm no Jedi, but look, remember the Jedi Order didn't see it coming. They were so fooled. And it wasn't until they're getting their asses handed to them. They're like, oh my God, there's a Sith Lord out there. Oh, we're all dead. Type of shit. Yeah, I think we're in that boat right now. We don't even see what's happening to us. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but Jeremy, I know this kind of ties into your thought process that where the real threat lies.
Well,
you want to add to that? Because I still want to kind of break down the other more kinetic direct actions that are going on.
And I think I can at least provide a good segue here too, Mark, because in the end of the day, as it pertains to these situations.
Yeah, we'll get to him in a second. Blackbeard in the house. All right.
As it pertains to this particular situation that we're talking about, right? Like, look, there's so many different examples of, people hate using the word government or governing structure or whatever word they want to use for those that we have. But look, the Constitution clearly expresses what is and what isn't. And in the end of the day, there are parameters for how the government is supposed to be, right? But nowhere, if there's nowhere providing the government to do 99.9% of the shit that it's supposed to do. That in the end of the day, we have to be a portion, we have to be active in thwarting much of these things, right? Like our founders knew that when they set this up, their hopes were that we were going to be an awakened people, that we had just come off of a revolution. We had just come off of winning our independence. And they figured, like, hey, look, so long as people continue to remember what we came from, they're going to be cognizant of the fact that, like, in order to prevent this, voting alone is not the only preventative measure. We have a responsibility and some level of duty to preserving our republic. If you sit there and you tamely surrender to attacks from authoritarians and tyrants, then you will be the subject of their rule. But that's not who we are as a people. That's not how we are designed. We weren't designed to be ruled. We were designed to be free. And unless, of course, that we can put forth an offensive instead of being in that preventative defense, as you suggested before, we're not going to get anywhere. And people have got to stop sitting in this, like you brought up, looking through a soda straw of, like, well, if we just elect this one guy, pardon me, but fuck that one guy. Where's he going to be when they're at your door? Where is he going to be when they're already inside your home, dragging you out, tearing your kids away? Because people say, oh, well, that would never happen. It's been happening. Randy Weaver and Ruby Ridge, that anniversary just was the other week. The ATF came in, shot the guy's wife and his son, and all over an eighth of an inch of a barrel on a shotgun. If you don't think that they're not going to continue to do stuff like that over arbitrary, ridiculous things, then you're gone. Like, it's a soda straw moment.
So yeah, it is a soda straw moment. I just want to actually add that, some of the two recent events to that, because again, there could be people who could argue, well, like, Randy Weaver, broke this law or should have done that. You can make the same, argument.
You're arguing for tyranny then.
Well, but yeah, but you can make the same argument with David Koresh and the Branson Davidians. But, can you make that same argument about the two, individuals who the FBI has killed just recently and early morning raids?
The old guy who shits in basically a colostomy bag.
Yeah. He made
a threat, wasn't he?
He made a stinky post. But so as we're talking language, though, so see, this is again, this is kind of an eye-opening moment, and there's a lot of people who've been seeing this, and maybe I'm the guy who's late to the party, but it's an eye-opening moment. So because we're talking about language, if you distort the language and you change, and so no one can, so there is no definition of what what is a woman or what is, however you want to phrase that. But if we change it and we make it so amorphous, right? So it's so fluid that today I could say, well, you did this and that's against the law. And then I could point to, well, yeah, but Hillary Clinton did even worse, or Joe Biden, who didn't even have the authority to store classified documents, blah, 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 blah. But we're changing the language. So that is, to Jeremy's point, in my opinion, and then bring in the language into it. And we're going to kind of come over to introduce Blackbeard and get him into this fight. But that is it. It is being morphed, and then it is being changed, and it is one of the probably the most powerful tools in this new form of warfare. And I overlooked that, and that's bad on me. Honestly, I was just thinking too paramilitary, direct action, unconventional warfare. Part of that unconventional warfare is the distortion or the reduction or the dilution of the language. Now we can't even say that this is a cup, and if we all can't have a common definition, then how do we even combat or identify or address or purchase or sell? You see what I'm saying? It's got such a huge, a negative effect on everything. And then just to last point, what you're saying, Jeremy, again, the FBI just killed 2 American citizens, and they did it publicly. They let his body just sit on the street. I mean, like,
well, look at Lavoy Finicum when they shot him dead on the freaking highway, and there was 2 other people in that vehicle. Really? Like, there was no care or concern the fact that you just lit up a vehicle with a child in it, no less. And it's like,
but to your point, Jeremy, that, as you said in a previous episode, these are the same people who are cheering and and cheerleading when we blow up a bridge or we don't do it, but our whatever our proxy blows up a bridge, kills a family, and now there's an innocent child. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we're all suddenly okay with that shit. Like, what
Mark,
the hell, man?
It no big deal though. We're certainly they're certainly not coming for us, despite all of this telltale signs of authoritarianism. I mean, we've never seen this anywhere in history before, but it's
all right. Hey, I'm sorry, I gotta get this on track. We've got, so again, in the Hollywood Squares game show, so we've got Blackbeard, who just joined us down below, and then on that side, which is actually the exact opposite of what it really is on my screen, and down there, we've got David, the non-suspicious former CIA guy. But now let's bring Blackbeard in here. I don't know, that was tough to say all of a sudden. And let's, if you don't mind, sir, tell everybody, just, introduce yourself again in case they hadn't seen you in one of the previous podcasts. I think you just were picking up what we're putting down. We're talking about, are we already at war? My argument is we already are at war. We just kind of got sidetracked on language. And for me, that it's a great moment, because I realized I missed that one of the components of how the war is being fought is language, and I overlooked that. So I'm throwing myself under the bus. But you want to let everybody know you're on mute still, by the way. But yeah, let everybody know a little bit about yourself, and then I think you've kind of heard what we're kind of getting at, and you're way more than smart enough to be able to chime in already, just based on what you've seen so far.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, we got you now, sir. Yep.
Okay. Well, I learned, I guess what set me on the track of studying the etymology of words, which is the origin of words, not necessarily just their definition, was a guy from Texas named Wayne. I can't remember exactly what his website was, or I'd throw it out there, but I also picked up a book that was part of the classical education as part of a liberal arts study, and that was called the Trivium, and that's, I think, making headway in a lot of like charter schools and things like that at this time. But it used to be part of the liberal arts, and the liberal arts were divided against the servile arts. So your servile art would be gear construction. I don't really want to talk about my day job, it doesn't matter, but that's my servile art. And then the liberal arts were meant in the classical definition of that term, which is liberty, which is where the same root that you get like library from, that you get liberation, things like that. And the idea is that in training up young people, especially in particular, but it was divided between the trivium and quadrivium. This would be part of the trivium. The idea is that you would make a person free first and foremost in their mind. And I'm going to tie this all back together here in a moment. But essentially what it says in this book that covers that is that there's only two ways for people to communicate. One is through imitation, and the second is through symbology. And every word is a symbol, and every letter is a symbol. And when we communicate language from one mind to another, that's called rhetoric. Grammar, it gives you the understanding of who, what, where, why, when, and it's the study of symbols is grammar. It actually comes from grimoire, which was a book of spells. But and then the second one is, or the third portion of the study is logic, which is the art of thinking without contradiction. And I think there's, you could look up a guy named Jan Irvin. I believe he was really big on this for a lot of years. I don't know if he's still out there putting out content, but I think that's why I initially picked up the book. So what does that mean? What that means is that, and you can look at, for example, George Orwell in 1984 talks about newspeak, which was a reduced vocabulary with reduced grammar, the aim being to reduce thought. Because again, if we can only communicate through imitation, you'll get some information from that, but not anything detailed or complex that the human mind is capable of constructing. So you go for the language, you change the symbols, and I think actually some of them play on like archetypical memories from our subconscious mind that influence how we perceive things without our awareness. And I think that's part of the reason that they name all these acts, into these acronyms. It's just, word salad of names, and then it's like, and it's the barf act, or what. It's like, well, that's easy to remember, but there's also a science, an ancient magical science, and there's different ways of conducting it, but it's called gematria, which is the assigning numbers to letters. Numbers are symbols too that represent abstract objects. So you put that all together, and I don't know a lot of like the common jargon that's used on the street now, but it's always seems to be trending more and more simplified. And I just think that the problem becomes is that you can gain perceptual control by limiting vocabulary and by manipulating the symbols that people come into contact with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and on that point, I mean, so the manipulating that, and and how you control the symbols that people come into contact with, as you said, then that translates into how you even express your own personal perception of what the world is around you. Whether you want to call, again, is this actually a cup? So and so where we were going with that, Blackbeard, before you kind of join in, and thank you again, high five right now, thank you. I know that was a kind of last minute thing, but I don't even know how we started kind of going down this road a little bit, and I do need to bring it back over, but you're still going to add to this. But it's that reductionism. It's that we reduce it to these things. We make it so people can't communicate. That we distort, or maybe even just say destroy or break apart. What we all know is real. That's the sun. All the words, the symbols, the logic. Behind it. The rhetoric. And now, so therefore, nothing can be actually described properly. And if something can't be described properly, then I'm now in a position to say, well, then how can you challenge my perspective, or how can you challenge my worldview? Because we're not, again, it's 2 + 2 = potato, as opposed to the reality that we all know it is. And this all started. And Blackbeard, I apologize. I don't know if you remember or have met David. Were you guys on a show together? I can't remember. Yeah, I thought you were, right? Yeah. So yeah, you guys know each other, right? So, and this all kind of started like, David was again just talking about, Reno dads and, the efforts that they're making out there trying to help men, and be fathers and raise their kids. And that's how this whole thing kind of morphed. Again, my perspective, and I'm happy. I love it. I just had a kick in the Johnson, or however you want to call it. Like, it woke me up. Like, hey, dude, I forgot one of the primary components of war fighting. Whether you want to call that propaganda or how whatever road you want to go down. There's a couple different ones, but language is a huge part of that. And getting a culture to either be afraid, or getting a culture to coalesce around an item, or an issue, or to separate and segregate and fracture over some other type of thing. It's a huge part of warfare, psyops. And I think that is really just another indicator. If you look at what's going on, and you look at all the incredible efforts that have been taken over the last, let's just take that all the way back, probably almost 20 years, right? Let's take that back into the Obama era. The effort that's been made so we don't see the world the same way. I'm looking at the wood line. I see 4 trees. You only see 2. David sees 6. We don't even have this shared commonality, so we can't even we can't have a rational conversation. We can't reach logical conclusions, to Jeremy's point, that either preserve our freedom or give us the ability to defend ourselves from whatever it is that's coming through that wood line. Blackbeard?
So the trivium is kind of a buttress against some of that, because again, it teaches you about things like logical fallacies, because a lot of times people say things that sound really great, but when you look into it, it's like, well, it's not actually rational what you're saying. It just sounds good. The other thing I'd say is that, you have to consider things like when the politicians come out with their slogans. You had, yes, we can, change you can believe in, build back better, make America great again. It's all, their terms are never defined, but they know that people in general will project whatever a great America looks like for them, or whatever change looks like for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, I want change because I'm not happy with how things are going. So sign me up, but people don't think through that. They just act on it or influenced by that. And that happens an awful lot. But Sun Tzu, I mean, right, in The Art of War, he talked about, I guess what the communists said decades ago, that they'd take America down without firing a shot. Sun Tzu didn't say America, obviously, but the whole idea was, if I can demoralize a people, right? If I can demoralize them before, ideally, I win the war without even firing a shot. If I can get you here, because they understand the principle that everything that exists is thought followed by desire, followed by action. So the action is the last thing to happen. So if I can influence you at the source of that pattern, then I stop the action from ever taking place.
Well, or to your point, and I'm going to bring this over to David, because just for everybody watching or listening, like, this is kind of, David and I had this conversation, it was late at the night for me, not too late for David, but 2230, 2300, and an idea came in my mind, and I called David up, I texted him first, and he was awake, and thinking you were playing Call of Duty or some shit. You said, you're like, dude, I'm just whatever. But Blackbeard, to your point, and I'm going to bring this over to David. If you can, even, you don't have to be 100% successful in the endeavor that you just pointed out. I just have to be, and again, everybody will have their own, a nation state or an enemy, an adversary might have their own different, rationale, or their metric, their decision-making process for what will constitute success. If I was looking at it, and to your point, Blackbeard, if I could use those techniques that you just said, if I could influence a nation from the inside, and if I could get 50% of the population to actually think 2 + 2 = potato, or be willing to go along with it because they don't want to, because again, of the going back into 1984, and some, those great books, and if they're just not willing to speak out. Well, if I get 50% of you guys to be clowns and say 2 + 2 = potato, well, then it's going to require less kinetic or direct action on my part to overthrow you or defeat you, or to accomplish my other goal, to neuter you so I can accomplish my other goal. And David, you had a great point on this, and I don't know if you want to chime in. You kind of see where I'm trying to set you up a little bit, but you might want to chime in a little bit differently, because I see it.
Well, I can't think back to that conversation, but I got 2 words for you guys: troll farm. Troll farm. And it was the easiest, most brilliant attack on America in a long time, right? You get a bunch of dudes with Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts, whatever social media accounts are, like Russia, China, whoever, and you just start saying crap, passing disinformation, stirring the pot. That's all you really need to do. We're not talking about controlling a percentage of the population. You're just trying to get a percentage of the population to question the narrative, question the story, right? And it goes both ways, and both sides, left and right, are easily manipulated on social media from these troll farms. That's the entire point of the farm, right? To get that misinformation out there. And when you're talking about, Sun Tzu is saying, let's get people to implode from within. You said it way more eloquently as a wordsmither, but that's the idea behind the entire troll farm. And I hate saying it's brilliant, but come on, it's pretty freaking brilliant to set these things up, because people are going after each other. All you want to do to stir the pot on the right is post something that's they're going to chew on. If you want to stir the pot on the left, post something that they're all going to want to chew on, and watch chaos happen. And I love chaos, but you could see it's almost, not saying everybody out there is a troll or part of that troll farm, but it builds from that, right? It's a big pyramid scheme. Troll farm gets a couple guys agitated and pissed off, and then they share it, and you just see it ballooning. And that one troll farm's like, man, I just created an army out of that one article, and I'm going to share one over on this side and get an army on that side and get them fighting to get, like online. But you're getting people to distrust each other. You're getting the population to distrust social media, rightfully, but no one gets off it, right? They continue to fight on it. They continue to pass disinformation. They continue to contribute to exactly what the troll farms are wanting. If that's not war, Mark, I don't know what is.
No, but that's exactly the point. And again, a great revelation. No, it is war. That's just a new generation. Whether you want to call this fifth generation, I don't care what you want to call it. It's just a new form of warfare. And now that we're actually having this conversation, and I know Redbeard will agree with me, but maybe we weren't smart enough to realize that until now. But like, we know that these things have been taking place for a long time. Now, this again, I just picked on Obama. It's actually been going on since back in the Bush and the Clinton era, right? And so if you're an adversary, and David, we'll come back to this. I want Blackbeard to actually respond to your comments before I go too far off field. But if you're an adversary that has a longer timeline, and you look at this and you realize, like, again, Sun Tzu, hey, I don't have to do this today. Like Jeremy, like, do I need to kick in your, like what we talk about? Like, why are you kicking in a guy's door for a guy who he's confined to a wheelchair? Or here, my favorite analogy, because I wrote a paper on this about groupthink, and I used the Branch Davidian, the Waco thing, as a part of this. Why are you going and getting all jocked up, getting all your gear on and storming a compound where on Tuesdays and Thursdays he's down at the drugstore or the ice cream place? Dude, you could just roll up just like the recent events. The guy's confined to a wheelchair, or he goes to the hardware store dude. You just had two uniformed officers just approach him in the street, and it easy peasy lemon squeezy. It's resolved. Instead, we want to go ahead and do these other things. So I actually think now that we're talking language, because that is another form of language. And Blackbeard, David had some great points. I don't want to add too much into it, but physical action, isn't that another form of language as well? Blackbeard?
Well, the ancients believed, that's kind of broad term, but and Timothy Leary said this as well, that the world is comprised of language itself. So certainly warfare is a kind of language. It's a symbolic interchange between opposing factions of a dialectic to create synthesis, which is like part of Hegel's philosophy, which it's a little bit of a tangent, but not entirely, because, I tell people this often. When we want to create digital worlds today, we write it in code. And a code is something that's hidden or concealed. But we also write it in a programming language. And so if we're able to construct a digital world, I don't think that there's a large distance between the way that reality itself is constructed and the way that we're simulating the construction of realities on computers. And to David's point, and I agree with him, if you're not familiar with it, you should look up the term mimetic warfare, because essentially what he is saying is that these troll farms, they create what's called a positive feedback loop, and that you're like, well, that sounds negative, but it just means that one action inside of that starts to perpetuate itself over and over and over and over again, rather than like I take an action and that leads to its discontinuation. So the mimetic warfare is a way of rapidly communicating. If you think about it, really, depending on how the companies throttle you or not, but almost an exponential communication of symbolic language that it can stir up emotion. It can generate friends and allies, and in very short order. So it's getting messy out there. And then if you take into consideration the deep fakes that exist, and I know many people have touched on that, but they can fake our voices as well. And so it's going, and then they can create videos that you can still tell that they're AI, but entire videos, like TV commercials, it'll all be just, you'll type in prompts into an AI system, and it will produce the advertisement that you want, assuming that we still have a consumer society after the dollar tanks, but that's another story. So we're entering an age of extreme deception like we've never seen before. And I think it's going to really stress people's sanity, honestly.
Okay, so let's use that as a segue. I still, and guys, fellas, boys, I'm laughing about this because, as Redbeard knows, I think this is like the 4th podcast I've tried to get out my argument about this whole we're at war. And I don't really know if I'm even going to be able to lay it out this time, because we're going in so many good little, like, separate conversations. And this is one of them right there. And I think it's important. I mean, look, there is a potential kinetic side, somebody shoving a bayonet into your chest or shooting you, blowing you up with an AP round, from a 105 or 155, and whatever the tank is calibrated to, chambered to. But it doesn't matter what the round is, the projectile. Dead is still dead, right? And there's a million horrible ways to die. So give me just a second here, guys, and let me just throw this out there. So my overall argument, just so I can get it in there, is, and I've kind of said it before, but I'm going to do an abridged version again. There are so many actions that have been taking place just within America in the last, let's just take it into 3 years, because this conversation is part of another conversation that really is kind of opening my eyes that, no, this has actually been going on for much, much longer. David's comments, Blackbeard's comments, and Redbeard's comments have really kind of made me realize that I kind of overlooked something. Again, I had a blind spot. I was a little bit too much soda strad, and I didn't have the ability to see that there's really 4 trees, as opposed to the 2 that I thought it was. But if you just take a step back and you just look at things that we can objectively point to say that these things happen, they were, whether you want to, kinetic just simply means that, like, something was destroyed, right? Through kinetic energy and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But train derailments, factories, burning and blowing up, and all, and a tornado suddenly destroys the Pfizer facility, or, in our, per our previous episodes, I've been trying to talk about this ammonium nitrate, being stolen off of a train at the perfect location, out in the middle of nowhere. And then soon after that, then fires just simultaneously take place across Canada. It's like, that's not how fires spread, right? And somebody will leave a comment and say, well, that is how fires spread. Like, so an ember from here, a fire here, like, goes 1,000 miles and lands, or even 500 miles, and then lands and starts a fire within 10 minutes of the first fire. Come on, man. Or as our president likes to say, come on, man. So that's inconceivable. We have labs being operated in the enemy held occupied territory of our one of our westernmost states, that are bio labs, and the government of that state wants to keep that on the down low, doesn't want anyone to talk about that. Jeremy, I don't know if I even want to bring up, because it's a horrific event, and I don't know if it ties into it, but maybe this is the time to bring it in. But, like, what's going on in Hawaii. I mean, my heart goes out to all those families. And I mean, boys and girls, just think about this. Like, I'm here to tell you, I'm a Christian, and I don't believe in suicide. Burning to death is probably one of my biggest fears. And I'm not sure that I would have the fortitude to actually suffer through that. If I had the ability to take my life, if I knew there was no chance of escape, and all I had was a handgun, and there's no way of getting out of this house, like to include shooting through the studs to weaken them so I could, like, maybe throw my body against it to finally escape. I'm saying no chance of escape. And the outcome is you either burn to death or you take one to the brain pan. I'm probably going to have to, flip a coin with God, because I'm not sure if I could go down that road. So people died in our most horrific of manners in Florida. And my heart goes out to all those, families.
Hawaii?
I'm sorry, Hawaii. Yeah, I just said Florida. I'm sorry. I kind of was thinking about the hurricane going on down there right now too. But I meant Hawaii. So I don't know if we want to go down that road, but I don't know if that falls into the category of what I'm thinking about from unconventional warfare perspective. But again, train derailments, produce, cows, chickens, pigs, all these eggs, all this infrastructure being destroyed. We've got military age males from China coming across our border, and they're not doing it like, most border. They're taking the rat lines. We've got spies within our military, and no one wants to talk about that. We've got malware on both military and civilian and government, software that's being discovered and being taught. There clearly is, from that more kinetic direct action type of perspective, there is clearly something going on, and I'm kind of setting David up. I'm trying to tee him up because I brought this up to him again at that late night conversation, a week ago, David, or maybe it was a little bit more. And David had a great point on this, and maybe this is a good chance for you to expound upon that. Just to remind you, you're saying it almost doesn't matter if it's China, and I'm not necessarily making a case that is China. I'd said in the past, well, okay, could this be terrorism? Well, it could be, but then we would have like some kind of historic breakthrough in the realm of terrorism, because this isn't how terrorist organizations operate. This is a level of sophistication that is it's even beyond. Let's just say the four of us constituted a terrorist cell, and we were being sponsored by, pick one of the usual bad guys, the usual suspects, Iran, North Korea, Cuba, whoever it was. Even with that state sponsor, and that potential resource, and money and maybe some training, we would not be able to pull this off. That's too sophisticated of a level. It has to be a state actor, and
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Not to interject real quick, but let's not leave out the United States on that one either.
Oh no, I'm trying to tee you up too. No, I'm saying it's a state actor. No, I'm trying to tee you up as well. I know you've got some comments here.
I had to put that quickly in there because I was just like, if I don't say something right now, I'm gonna forget it because my mind is.
Well, okay, no, it was a great interruption because I was kind of just throwing that out there and let people,
again, creating that perception, because those are the places we initially think of, and to suggest otherwise would be unbecoming of an American.
But when we go back all the way into this linguistic conversation, how language is being used as a tool of war, right? And that is taking place, right? I think we all kind of can agree on that. Some of us are a little bit later to the party than others, but me, but,
hey, you made it.
Yeah, but I'm here now finally. So here, woo, party. But I just kind of want to go to David because David had brought up another perspective. David, do you remember this conversation? Did I tee you up properly?
So I'll work with it. So kind of, I believe there's a lot of state action stuff. We're talking about state action versus terrorism versus, random people just being anarchists or whatever. I think from my perspective, everything that we're seeing has to be state sponsored. And I think it's very clear. We've worked with terrorists. They're not smart enough to pull off what we're talking about. This is like such high level thinking. It's such a long game that terrorists don't operate that way. They're not thinking long game. They're not thinking this begets this down the road. Like that's just not how they operate. So, but I think where we were talking was we look at the fires, we look at the ammonium nitrate, we theft, we look at what happened in East Palestine, we look at all these incidents, and I like to call that's the smoke. Whether that is coincidence, whether that is state sponsored, whether that has some other explanation, is almost irrelevant because we have enough fire that we see. So that's the smoke. Where there's smoke, obviously there's fire, but we don't know, right? We see China doing what they're doing. We see them buying up all the farmland. We see them buying up all the land around our bases and our sensitive facilities and sites. We see the actions that they're taking, infiltrating our military, our CIA, our State Department, the Department of Energy, all these different places through the same spycraft we're pulling off overseas ourselves. So, but again, these are all little fires that were not little, but they're all fires that are actually happening that show us that something is going on. There is absolutely a Cold War, maybe technically a little bit warmer war going on between us and China. On the outside, people don't see those things. So, but when we look at what we know is China, when we look at what they actually are doing, it's documented that they're buying up the land. They're buying up the farmland. They might have their reasons, but those reasons do not take into account like, oh, let's do this to help America. We know those reasons are going to be beneficial to themselves. But then we look at all these other incidences and we have to ask ourselves, Is there something else there? Let's just keep looking. We see the smoke. Let's keep looking. I'm not personally someone who sees the fire quite yet on a lot of this, but I do believe that there's enough fires elsewhere that we need to be aware that these things could happen. If somebody is causing these things, our government, our national security, setup has to start taking the precautions to protect us against that attack in the future. Even if it isn't China and it just happens to be some coincidence on any of these events, our government should realize, damn, it could have been China, and we need to protect against that, right? And I use China because, as we talked about, the old adversary that we've had, Russia, I think, asked us a couple years ago, they'd be part of this conversation as an equal. And now if we look, we're like, yeah, I don't know what their true capabilities actually are, but we know China's capable still. We know they have the resources still. And we know they have the focus. They're not distracted by a war, right? They're focused on us. And that was kind of more my point of, there's a lot of smoke out there. We need to be paying attention. We need to be looking for the clues, not necessarily manifesting what we believe is evidence, but actually seeing to pay attention and prepare ourselves for the inevitability that some of this stuff could be the beginning of an attack or the beginning of some sort of move to cripple our nation, whether economically, socially, you name it.
And then on the economic point, just to bring you back to that, I mean, remember the crossroads conversation? As a nation, we all reach crossroads, historic crossroads throughout time. Blackbeard, you might chime in on that as far as like the linguistics and how we, use that in the terminology and how it creates images. But we're at a crossroads. China's clearly at a crossroads. And David, from your personal experience for what you're doing right now, you had a very unique perspective on that economic situation that China's in creates this crossroad, and they either go in this direction to resolve it, or they go in this direction. And what I thought was most interesting of that is, to me, it was clear, like they already made a choice. They're taking, this one path, and that path is going to be war, right? Whether that there's something else, something or someone or other factors that are helping pull those strings, but that is a path that they clearly are going down as a nation. Whether that's with us or somebody else, it's irrelevant. I mean, to your point.
Yeah, and they've been facing a crossroads. And before I go too far into that, about 10 years ago, I was interviewing for an assignment in the agency, and basically the interviewer's like, talk to me about China or whatever it was for 5 minutes, just to see if I could handle having a conversation or whatever. And part of my conversation was their cultural issues are going to become their biggest crisis in the future, and not necessarily economic or military or some sort of external threat. It's going to come from internally, not unlike what we're seeing, but I think a little bit worse. And what I mean is, that's where we come to this crossroads where China economically is struggling big time. August has been an incredible month for their finances, like their housing industry. I don't know the specifics of how bad it is, but huge asset managers are defaulting on loans because China's been, free money out there. They've put, this idea that we got to build fast, we got to build up as big as we can. And of course, that kind of pressure economically is bad. And on the other side of that, culturally, they're running into the one child law, the single one child law, whatever it's called. It might be that, but where you can.
No, it's the one child. They're running into the negative consequences of that policy.
Yeah, but they've been doing this for generations. So culturally, they're like, okay, now we can have 2 children, but just because you say you can have 2 children doesn't mean you change an entire culture overnight. And it's not as simple as everybody just has 2 children and adapts. Their entire society, from infrastructure, from how they think, from how they educate, from how they buy food, logistics, their entire infrastructure, like society, is built around a husband, a wife, and 1 child, right? You start to have 2 children, that everything was built for one. And culturally, they're not ready for that. They don't know how to, like we have minivans and SUVs. Like we're ready. Give me 6 kids. I got a 5-bedroom house. Or you could just pack them in. We're built to expand, where China isn't necessarily built that way. And it's not as simple as, all right, let's just build bigger houses or widen our roads for our SUVs and all that. It's also culturally, there's the concept of that, like in America, being a dad who's around a lot of parents, and dare I offend people, the single child syndrome, right? It's the parents who have one child. They dote on this child. They spoil this child. They have a lot of resources to dump into this child, that they don't have to spread out among 2 children or 3 children or whatever. That's a cultural thing. China's been raising an entire society of single child syndrome kids, if you will, for
I never even thought about that.
The longest time. You can't just turn that around.
No.
It's a selfish culture. You can't just turn it around. And I don't think people think how big a deal their cultural revolution is going to be. So that's kind of that crossroads. Like, they got a lot of pressure economically. They got a lot of pressure, more pressure than anybody could think about culturally. It's not as simple as having more kids, right? It's so big, and that's the crossroads. And when you come to the crossroads, you have to decide, how do we dig ourselves out of this? We can't collapse. That's an option. We're not going to fail, right? We're not going to collapse in how, you look at your options. What are options to pull yourself out of economic distress, out of depressions, out of recessions, out of whatever it is? Sometimes that's get the war machine pumping and, get going, invade somebody, do something, chase the oil. I don't know. I'm just saying, war is a very rational mindset for a country to pull themselves out of an inevitable collapse. I don't know what that solves, but it's the crossroads that they're faced with. I think that they have to decide what kind of role does China want to play in the future? The one that is fighting for their survival very aggressively, or something else? But that's just my word vomit of what I see going on there. But if you look at all the strife we have, that we know it's targeted at us and it's from China, we're their adversary. No one else is their adversary. It's us. I wouldn't put it past them to continue to target us for their own economic prosperity, to save themselves, if you will. So I think that's kind of where we're at with them.
What I really like, and you just really elaborated it again a second time, really very nicely. You'll hear a lot of pundits actually sit there and say, "Oh, China's never going to go with war. China is not going to go to war with America because they need America. They need our money. They need our consumer. I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, and I'm kind of setting up Redbeard for something here in the future. But like, why? Like, if you don't care, like, you could make a solid argument that China intentionally just killed off a huge portion of its population. Intentionally. I mean, there is a way to make that argument. I mean, I'm not going to do it right now, but if you're a nation state that's willing to do it, and as David just pointed out, that has all these internal pressures, and then to what I think Redbeard's going to say, a lot of those pressures are being focused internally here in America as well. And if you've got already evil, corrupt, immoral people, you back them into a corner. You don't think they're going to go, the whole 9 yards? You think they're just going to like surrender and just like, okay, you got me. I guess I'm going to jail now. Like,
China did have an opportunity to get rid of all their old people over the last couple of years. You know what I mean? Like, so they're not saying, I'm obviously not defending anything with China, but with COVID, that was a horrific, fantastic opportunity.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
But they locked them all in and protected them and saved them, when they should have just been like, hey, let's party.
Well, hang on.
Go out.
Well, hang on a second. Hang on. Okay. Are you talking about the elderly or the young people in China?
Elderly, the ones who are
Yeah, okay, but we'll I don't think we're ever going to know the numbers on that. I think honestly,
Sure.
if you
They
look
hid
at
so much information during that time.
yeah. And
Yeah.
and again, now maybe I'm kind of tap dancing around this because I don't want to get banned on YouTube, but and that actually opens up the different conversation. We need to get off of YouTube, Jeremy. We need to be doing this more on Rumble and other BitChute and stuff like that. But to your point, David, like, yeah, most people should have just like, yep, that's it. Have everybody have a big party. That's how it used to be done. Have a big party. Everybody commingle. Everybody gets sick. The weakest of us will die off. Everybody will now have natural immunity. See, back to Blackbeard's point, and Redbeard and David, we aren't even using language, and it's not just language. We again trust the science. Well, apparently we don't trust the science anymore. This isn't our first day on planet Earth as humans. We've been around for a long time. Diseases have been around for a long time. We actually do know what does and doesn't work. Those policies. So to your point, David, I'm not 100% sure that, again, I think everybody should have been doing that, but we don't know the numbers out of China. We don't know how many elderly Chinese died, but we clearly know that China and a communist regime really doesn't give a shit about its populace, right? And so they're willing to do anything. And maybe that's a way of like bringing down their economic distress in order to open it up for, as you just pointed out, hey, we need more young people, and we can't, this one child policy isn't working because we're under these economic stressors. We've got to have a more vibrant generations coming forward. And on top of that, and as I was just trying to say, I've heard some people argue, well, that these are the exact reasons that China isn't going to go to war with America. My point is that China isn't going to go to war with America. China is setting the conditions, and we can chime in here. I know Redbeard's got his opinion. Maybe it isn't. Maybe there's other forces that are actually manipulating these events, just like World War I. I mean, go back and look at history. For anybody who's doubting what I'm saying right now, the whole anarchist movement before World War I, this was a real thing back in the day. How do we know we're not in some type of environment like that again, where they're really, the World Economic Forum, Soros and all these evil people? How do we not know who's really pulling the strings? How do we really clearly know with 100% certainty that it is this party or it is that party or it is that guy or it is that? We don't even know that right now. Things are being so colluded and not colluded. The obfuscation is just it's occluded our ability to see if there's even 3 or 4 or 6 trees. I kind of rambled there a little bit, David. Dude, every time you fucking start talking like that just really, it's a great eye-opening thing. I don't think people are considering that, and I hate to say it, I don't even think people in our government are even thinking that way right now. Or maybe they have the ability to do it and they just elect to not do it.
I don't know. I just see it from, again, I kind of am seeing the world through the lens of a dad. And through my experience, I mean, when I was in the agency, I happened to be over in that region. So I got to work with that culture a little bit and get to see how they are, got to interact with them. And you just start to pick up on these little nuances of how society works, how cultures work. And I think it's a bigger problem for China than anybody's even thinking about. And
yeah,
it's going to be very interesting over the next few years how they're going to pull themselves out of it, if they even can. That's a challenge.
Well, but I don't want to get too far away from the point. To the point of your argument, they're at a crossroads. They've reached this crossroads because of a generational issue and an economic issue. There's only so many ways that a nation state can try to resolve that problem. And one of those ways is warfare. And then that ties into, are we already at war? And look, China could be being played as a pawn. There could be somebody, a puppet master pulling the strings on that side of the world too. I mean, I'm not so smart to, or let me rephrase that, how I say it. I'm not so foolish to think that I know everything, and there are potential and possibilities outside of my comprehension. And if you believe in like, again, Bilderberg, World Economic Forum, things of this nature, like how do we know China's even an autonomous state? And maybe these guys are all part of that too. I mean, and I know Redbeard's going to kind of come down this road a little bit in this direction. Again, I don't want to speak for Redbeard, but I'll just ask the audience, leave a comment. Do you actually trust any politicians and even in our system? I mean, seriously, I can't even come up with 5 politicians. I can't even count on one hand the number of politicians within our system that I actually trust.
Blackbeard, I got to get going in a couple minutes, but I have since we've talked about the words and the language and all that. There's a word I keep seeing describing our government. It's a gerontocracy. It's a government ruled by old people, and every time I come across another story of another one of our exceptionally old politicians, McConnell, that's just whatever. I think this just happened yesterday. It is sad, but I think of that word and I'm like, no kidding, people. Gerontocracy. We are a government of old folks, and we got to take back some of the language fighting. So I'm using gerontoc.
Freaking McConnell had his little reboot and did not compute on stage that other week, and it's like
he just did it yesterday.
He did it again. He had the blue screen of death yesterday.
Oh yeah, Jeremy, you missed this? Yeah, no.
Oh,
he froze up for over almost 30 seconds yesterday.
Dude,
froze up, blue screen of death for 30 fucking seconds yesterday.
I like that's gonna be the long-term expression for all of these people that have that. It's they're either rebooting or it's blue screen of deathing. Okay, like I'm on board with that.
They're not real.
Hey, so David, if you've got a bounce, because I know Blackbeard's got some comments here, and honestly, in Redbeard, again, another episode where you've been incredibly patient, and I know you've got some things to add on to, but let's give you your due because you're taking the time out of your life to be here, and I know you got some other things going on. So, give us your closing, comments and thoughts here, and then we'll, thank you, and I'll send you a consolation prize.
That's it. I mean, I've said it a few times, like there's something going on the large scale. It's state sponsored. On the internal level, it's happening every day. I see it so much in the world that I occupy as a father with kids and a family. It goes back to that language where boys can no longer be boys. They can't be what they're naturally inclined to do, competitive, aggressive, because those are under the word pyramid, those fall under violence, and violence is bad. And as long as violence is bad, anything that corresponds or is part of that violence, again, the aggressiveness, the competitiveness, the fierceness on the football field, on the baseball field, aggressiveness, these are all negative things now that boys can no longer be. So while part of that is, yes, it's language, I see it at that level. It's neutering our boys. It's taking out what makes men so great as the defenders of our nation, as defenders of our communities, and the defenders of our families, right? Is our ability to take risk to protect, take risk to defend, to do all these things. And we're getting an entire generation to think that is bad. So that's where I see this happening, even at the smallest level. And it starts with that language also, right? That, we're not just talking about the, changing what a woman is, menstruating person, birthing person, all that stuff. But even down at the lowest level where we are devaluing our children, our boys specifically, who learn that who they are is unacceptable in society and they're not valued in society. And how do you think that carries on? They fail at school, they fail in life, they fail at society, and they can't go on to lead us. We're just seeing it across the board. So yeah, we talk about the easy, like, nuance of menstrual people, those words that are being removed, but we're not looking at the grand scheme of things of what else is being removed and what kind of impact does that have on society? So internally, we're dealing with all these things all the way up to externally, where state-sponsored organization or countries, terrorism, if you want to call it that, but it's state-sponsored. It's China, and they have reason to weaken us. They have reason to cut us off. They still need to live in some sort of symbiotic world with us. But if they're calling the shots, if we're the crippled one, right? If they're the ones coming to the rescue, they're the ones with the influence, the power, it's going to pull them out of, it's their crossroads, right? It's going to pull them out of the problems that they're facing. So, and all that, I think that's my closing statement. How about that?
I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I thought that was a pretty goddamn good closing statement right there.
Well, good job, Dave.
Yeah, dude. High freaking five.
Well, before you leave, also, I've been looking at DB on there the entire time, and the first thing that I thought of when I saw that was Diamondback. I don't know why that sounds so cool, but god dang it.
Is that your new nickname? Are you Diamondback?
I think it's a freaking awesome name.
Pretty badass. I don't want to fuck around with a Diamondback. Those things will kill you.
Oh, they're dangerous. You don't want to mess with those.
No.
Yeah.
Damn Diamondback.
I just had to throw that in there before you left.
Yeah, that's just old nickname. Everybody calls that. I'm usually known by David or DB. So there you go.
Yeah, fair enough.
Awesome.
Well, to me, you're known as the creator of the capitalist caliphate. That's what I'm always going to know you. You are the pig in the top hat with the monocle. That's
you are
your fucking you are the brainchild of that idea. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Redbeard, Blackbeard, it's been fun. Mark, always, I appreciate it. And Blackbeard, man, I just want to hear you talk. I freaking love it. Like, it's so good. It opens your eyes. Oh, I love it. I can't gush. I'm sorry. I apologize. So
gushing is allowed. You can gush. Hey, well, let's come back and this, fast forward into we're at 100. Jeremy and I almost said 1 minute. We're at 1 hour and 36 minutes. So just come into the 136, David, and then you'll pick up Blackbeard because he's got some comments here. I already know. He's
can't wait.
Holding his tongue. All right. Thank you very much, sir. Again, as always, appreciate it. Say hi to everybody. And you guys have a great, matter of fact, have a great Labor Day weekend, sir.
Oh, baseball and football. I can't wait.
And hot dogs and barbecue, I hope, and some alcoholic beverages. Because that sparkling water you were drinking all night tonight, it was kind of pissing me off a little bit. But
I got to go to a school open house. I can't.
Whatever. I thought you were supposed to go to those things drunk. I mean, isn't that how it goes when you're a parent?
I should.
Just classy drunk.
Thanks, David.
We'll
see you next time. Thank you, sir. All right, fellas. David left us with a lot of things to really chew on. Blackbeard, thank you for again. We got to give you props and for coming in the last minute. And but I know you've got a lot to add to that. And on that note, fellas, here's what I'm thinking of. Let's let Blackbeard chime in here for a bit. Redbeard, I know you've got to make your own. I know you've got your story that you want, or your argument that you want to present. So how about we just go down that road? I think I've already made mine. I'll just make it one last time before you guys chime in. There clearly are operational acts being conducted inside of the contiguous United States of America. It could actually expand into other, not properties, but other states that fall within the United States. But here within the continental United States, there clearly are acts that have been taking place. This is my argument. Again, all the factory fires and burning and the train derailments and the ammonium nitrate, the wildfires in Canada, even last on America. No offense to any Canadian fans, but you see what I'm getting at. There are clearly acts of unconventional warfare taking place inside of the United States, the contiguous United States. There are certain recent events, and I really am hesitant to even kind of bring this in, but they may actually have natural causes to them, but I'm having a hard time embracing that. And I think I'm having a hard time embracing it based on the actions of all the political and the government officials in Hawaii, and that's
You
really,
don't barricade
and that's
an
a
area
sad thing
with
right there.
natural
They are the ones who
environment.
are changing the language and causing these. I don't even know. That's such a tough one. But that is my ultimate argument. And then my realization from tonight's podcast is like, I made a mistake. I forgot the importance of language. I forgot to take into consideration how propaganda, language, and these attacks on those type of structures, if you will, or foundations or pillars of who we are as people, that has been going on for a long time. And I think, Blackbeard, I mean, that's really, you're just way smarter than any of us on that right there. But so where do you want to go with that, sir? I mean, like, I want to give you a chance to chime in. Do you want to respond to David? Do you got more to add now that you've heard a little bit more of the conversation? Where do you want to go? Let's turn it over to you for a second.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't under the impression initially that it was something that you wanted to talk about in terms of like kinetic warfare specifically.
Well,
Because
that's
I
where
think,
that was the original argument for me. Like, I was looking at all these events here. I'm sorry, let me change the view real quickly. I was trying to make this argument that I'm looking at these very kinetic events, and to me, that's what I was trained to do. That was my background in the agency. Like, even though we didn't do it because it was the forever war and it was more direct action, open warfare, but that is what in the agency, that is the group I operated in. That's what we were supposed to do. Like, so think OAS and Redbeards and SOE and that kind of stuff. That's who we are in the agency. So I looked at it from that perspective. This conversation tonight and conversations recently have kind of maybe realized that maybe there's a little bit more to it. So yeah,
well,
but that is where we were coming from. Tonight wasn't going to be about language. It just suddenly happened that way.
I think that it's total war that we're in, and that the kinetic aspect is a part of it, and that it's ramping up. And I think that as things deteriorate further and further, we'll see more and more instances of those happening. And I can speculate on the motivations for some of that. Right now, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are attempting to establish a new global monetary system. I don't know how well that's going to go for them, but I think what they're trying to do is help accelerate the decline of the petrodollar standard.
Yep.
And then in the power vacuum that will remain after its deconstruction, they'll be able to construct their new framework. And like DB was talking about, be the man on the hill. And when you're going through the death of money, and we're not even close to the worst of it yet, but if you really want to get people acting in a desperate way, you go for their wallet, because money itself is a symbol of energy and time. It's what we sacrifice for so that we can engage in commerce. But it's like a metric, and it's a yardstick, and it has different qualities. It has to be durable, fungible. There's a few others. And, our money system is it's at the point now, and it has been, it died really in 2008. They built it up through quadrillions and quadrillions and quadrillions of derivatives stacked on top of each other, all of these financial instruments. And the reason, well, there's a few reasons they do that, but the money in our system is a debt instrument. It's a promissory note. And so in order for the money supply to grow, you have to create a unit of debt, which we call a loan. And so the problem is that in the system that's based on perpetual growth, you have to therefore issue perpetual debt in order to maintain the standard of living that you were having. The problem is that debt can't build forever. Sooner or later, somebody has to pay. And that kind of goes.
Oh no, I just said, yep. I'm like, yeah, keep preaching, brother. Yep.
Well, to DB's point, it's not as though China at this time isn't operating on a similar financial rails. It is similar, but it's actually worse in a lot of ways, because 40% of their banking is done through shadow banking, which doesn't have the same level of regulation. Not that we can necessarily trust statistics that are coming from there, but that makes it a system more fragile. And fragile systems, if you look at, for example, the entitlements that we have even in this country, it's like they're being funded by young people, but the young people are smaller in terms of their generational size than the elderly who are drawing the benefits. It's not exclusively elderly, but so the point is it's like you have to have a larger base to feed those kinds of things in order to maintain the system. And as part of the reason we're seeing the idea of the central bank digital currencies being floated in, because it'll allow for a greater control over people's purchasing habits. Now, as for the derailing of the trains or the blowing up of the food factories and things like that, there could be a few different reasons for that, but I think that the most likely reason is that they understand that right now we're trying to battle inflation. And part of that, I think, is because they increased the monetary supply by 40% during the pandemic a couple of years ago. And you simply can't do something like that unless you keep the money velocity low enough, which is why after 2008, you didn't see rampant inflation, because it was all held in reserves and it wasn't leaking out into the economy proper. But when you deal with like the prices of things and the rate of inflation, they have demand side and they have supply side. And so you can either increase, if you increase the demand for a given set of goods or services, though that demand pressure will cause the prices of those goods and services to rise. Or alternatively, in the absence of demand, you can reduce the supply to increase the costs. When you blow up, I mean, think about what happened to the supply chain during the pandemic. Then you go in here, you buy up all the farms so that people are only eating the kind of foods that you'll sell them that probably will toxify their body, because again, this is total war. So it's not just about economics. That's only one facet of it, but it ties to the kinetic. It ties to what they've done to us in terms of our health, which is declining. And that is, to DB's point, is also related to the crisis of masculinity. But you go blow up the food, we have less food to draw upon. Suddenly there's shortages in the grocery store and the prices are going up to levels that we didn't anticipate. But that's part of the total war that's happening, and I'm sure that China's a player in that, but I don't think that they're by any means the only one.
So before I want you to go further, but before you do, let me just ask this. So again, supply and demand, pricing that. So if you can figure out a way to, again, there's more older people, and because of just the simple fact that they're older, that whether they do or do not, but mathematically speaking, the older you are, the probability increases that you have more wealth, whether that's in assets, whether it's in actual money, whether it's in investments. You'll have more of that because you've been around longer. A 21-year-old doesn't have as many resources as a 55 or 62-year-old does, right? It's just a time thing, right? So to your point right there, so how do you change that system? And I think what you just said, to me anyway, what you just said is like, well, you figure out a way to create a unique class within those younger generations that suddenly feels, maybe it's not a feeling, maybe it's actual, maybe there's a different way to describe it, but who feels emboldened. It's like, no, I am the upper class now. I am the protected class. I have these capabilities. I'm making 100,000 a year, but because I have the right, group think, or the right, 1984 type of think, I can get away with more things. I can say some more things. I can do some things. It's just like any of the Politburo and apparatchik, of the former Soviet Union. It was the same type of thing. You'll create a caste, and I mean it, caste, a caste within your society that's never going to buck the system, because that's power. They now are the people in power. Blackbeard, does that make sense? I mean, what you were just saying, that's what your thoughts or your statements maybe just think of that. Does that tie in, or did I just go in the wrong direction?
Well, I mean, it doesn't really play as much into like the unsustainability of the entitlement programs. They can just, what they've done, and this is why one of the reasons people are upset is that if I want, I can either tax you to fund something, or I can increase the money supply. But the problem is that the most price sensitive are. Yep.
Oh, no. Or to the point, or I could kill. Look, I could kill some of you off, and then I no longer have to fund you. I mean, I think that's what DB and I were talking about when it comes to China. Look, I'll be the first one to say it. I don't think I'm ever going to see any of the programs that I am supposed to get for all the things I've done in my life, my retirement, my social security. I don't think those things are embarrassing. So I'm just saying, when you started saying that, I just wanted to interrupt and say, but what if you just killed all those people off? And Jeremy, I know you know what I'm kind of alluding to here. What if you just killed all those things off, and then that's money you don't ever have to pay? Like, that's money that you're still budgeting for, but it doesn't have to go out to recipients.
That will happen, in my opinion, if it isn't already. That's, Bill Gates came out and said as much. He said, what if we could have a few more teachers if grandma didn't live quite so long? I'm paraphrasing that, but that's basically the gist of what he said. It's true. I mean, you have to think about too, it's like, what has happened to the human lifespan? Right now in the Western world, it's actually declining for the first time, but people are, living quite a long time. And so it's becomes a simple matter of math at one point. I think most of this could be solved with a non-inflationary money supply, because then you wouldn't have something like the Cantillon effect, where for those people who are close to the levers of money creation and positions of power, they reap the benefits before it has time to dilute into the broader populace. And so what they are doing is they are stealing the wealth of the population because of their close proximity to the origin point of money creation. That's one. And then two, the older generations are stealing the wealth of the younger generations, both literally in terms of the taxes that we're paying on our paychecks, but also because they're the ones that are printing the money that dilutes the overall purchasing power, so that the number that comes on your check remains the same, because otherwise you would have to reduce it. The money just wouldn't be there.
Yep.
So, and you can't, I mean, people just won't stand for it. It doesn't matter whether or not not you specifically, but if anyone understands what I'm saying, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, and this is one of DB's strengths, I think, is that he understands the practical implications of these things that are happening. And I think Redbeard, and I think that you understand it too, quite honestly. But I think it does help, because then you can start looking for solutions. And one of them is that if you can't just print money out of thin air, well, then you can't steal its value out of thin air either. And you don't have infinite funding for the non-governmental organizations that are responsible for implementing these crises the world over. You have to actually earn your money, and wouldn't that be a shame?
You just made me, I'm kind of smiling. You made me think of a meme I saw the other day. It was kind of like, it's one of Norman Rockwell's, I can't remember what this one is titled, but it's a man speaking.
You can print money. Why do you need to tax us?
Yeah. Yeah. Jeremy, go ahead, say it. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I have that picture saved on my phone, but yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay.
If you can print money, why do you even need to tax us?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Because it's
hang on. Before you start, you've been silent for a lot tonight, and I know you've got a lot of things to say on this. You've actually really opened my eyes, my eyes, my brain, however you want to say it. You've opened up my way of thinking here in the last couple of weeks since we kind of started talking about this whole subject and the podcast. So, Blackbeard, God, you're just a smart motherfucker. But Redbeard, I know you've got some things to say, so add into what you're going here, but then don't be afraid to take it into the road. I know where you want to go. I know where you want to go, and so it's you, sir. Go ahead, drive. You got control of the wheel. Drive.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I'll tell you why. If they can print all their own money, I mean, think about it. They can do it, but we can't. The dichotomy is simple: power. Absolute power and control. That is the absolute reasoning as to why they're doing what they're doing now, whether it's mandates, whether it's masks, whether it's ridiculous fucking sicknesses that they want to sit there and I'll say it, like I for those of you who listen and monitor this, cancel me, don't cancel Mark, he's a good guy, but I don't give a shit if you want to cancel me, because I'm quite frankly, I'm over it, because we look, and here's the broader point that Mark knows I'm going to go into. You have to pick. Do you want your personalities or do you want your liberty? You can't have both of them. You cannot have both of them. You either value your liberty, you value your rights, or you value a person on a podium in a pulpit beyond anything else. And look, fuck your people, fuck your, your personalities. If you want to vote for somebody, that's the beauty of this country. You can go vote for somebody. I don't give a shit if you vote for Mickey Mouse, which I actually know people who have because they're so over it. We used to be a nation, and I'm speaking specifically about the United States, in which our founders imbued us in our documents to have a greater love of liberty than of a personality that we would put forth to defend it even. And the reason for that is because people are corruptible. At some point, down the road, those we entrust with the authority to defend our liberty or our rights will falter at some point. Washington did. And on his deathbed, he realized that it was one of the greater mistakes that he made.
Because we're all humans.
We're all humans, and it doesn't necessarily make you inherently bad immediately. But look, in the end of the day, we were entrusted to keep our republic. And you can point the fingers, and you can do this, and you can do that. Look, all of this stuff has been a result of our lackadaisical disposition towards responsibility. You can sit there and blame Biden. You can sit there and blame Obama. You can sit there and blame Bush and Cheney and Clinton's and all of that. Look, who let it happen? Who lacked the fortitude to say, no, we will not comply? We need to provide a culture of non-compliance. We need to provide a culture of saying, absolutely fucking not. This is not going to happen again.
Jeremy,
because
Jeremy, we did. We.
Yeah, no, and that's just it. That's the point I'm trying to make. Like, I guess the way that I'm phrasing the question is multiple different ways to point out the fact that there's only one center that this all comes back to. The people that were expected above all to keep this republic, to preserve our rights, to preserve our liberty, has always been us. And that is shown through our documents in the Constitution, in which, yes, we provide and delegate being a very powerful word. We delegate the authority to certain areas within government, but we have the ability to revoke that delegation at any time. And the fact that we do not take this responsibility as we should, the fact that we don't make good on our ownership of our liberty and our rights and our ability to revoke that delegation is why we're here. We, in and of ourselves, are culpable in the situations that we're in.
And I just had to throw this in there before you go too far afield.
Yep.
God, this is why I love all of you guys and everybody who's watching and comments. But to Jeremy's point right there, again, unscripted. It's just humans having a conversation. So I spent a lot of time in the military, and there is a thing in the military called delegated authority. And Jeremy just talked about that. And what I loved about that is I personally, again, that's twice now. I got my ass kicked twice tonight in this podcast. Delegated authority in the military. I could be the whatever it is. I'm the patrol leader. Maybe I'm a sergeant. Maybe I'm a lieutenant. Maybe I'm a captain. Whatever it is, I'm the guy in charge. And then I have to go off and do something else. I can delegate authority to whether it's Redbeard or Blackbeard, and like, hey, in my absence, Blackbeard is going to be in charge of X, Y, and Z. So Blackbeard will have that delegated authority. He doesn't have my rank. He doesn't have my total authority. He has I gave you my authority in my absence, but when I come back, I assume all authority. And in my absence, you can't exceed that authority. Yes. And that authority might only go so far. And to what Jeremy just said, what I just realized is like, no, we are the citizens. We are the patrol leaders. Again, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, it doesn't matter what the rank is. We are the ultimate authority. We have delegated that authority to these representatives to hey, I'm giving you the authority to make bills, pass laws, tax it, And what I just really love, what I love about what Redbeard just said is like, we've forgotten that we're the ones who control that authority. It's our authority. And we need to take that back and say, okay, you fucked up. I didn't give you that authority to do that. And you've taken it too far. I said, I'm going to be gone for 3 hours. You got to finish, paragraph 4 of the op order while I'm gone. That's all I said for you to do. And now I've got you. I come back and you've got guys doing like burpees and push-ups and shit. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Does that make sense, Redbeard? You did. Well, it makes sense to me. I don't know if that makes sense to a lot of other people, but
and for anybody, I think it makes a lot of sense. I'll even use an example that Chris Hall uses. Look, you say you work at McDonald's, you're working the line, okay? You have a guy, say you run the kitchen back there, you run the line, whatever the case is, and this is partially from being an executive chef's son too, because I also help run the kitchen for my dad, who's an executive chef. I was delegated the authority by my father to have a more personal example of, look, you run my prep station. I need you to make sure that all of my prep is being done appropriately. These are the list of items that I expect of you to do. Because look, an executive chef runs the kitchen, but he can't oversee every single thing every minute. So
exactly.
I'm like, yeah, roger that. Sounds good. So I would make a list and I'd say, hey, does this list make sense to you? Absolutely. All right, roger that. I'll post the list. We'll make sure it gets done. So my delegated authority was to oversee 3 different people to make sure that those operations are getting done in conjunction with the job that I'm supposed to do. Now, if my dad, who's the executive chef, catches me working the line when I'm not supposed to, or I'm not explicitly told, hey, I need backup on the line. Can you pull over here real quick? If I'm overworking the line, my dad 110% would pull me aside and be like, hey, the fuck are you doing? Get off the line, go work your job. Why? Because that's not my problem at that point.
The authority he had delegated to you doesn't go beyond.
And here's exactly.
The thing. Yeah.
And
again, I wanted you to write the op order. I didn't want you to put everybody through
it's
calisthenics. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And look, in the end of the day, in saying that, in recognizing the fact that we are the people that separated, we are the people that came together and delegated and revised and finished on our document, which is the Constitution, what our rights and liberties are, the fact that they're inalienable, the fact that they pre-exist government, and the fact that in our document, it explicitly talks about what the role of government is, and this was debated by our founders. What is the primary objective of government? To preserve and defend the rights and liberties of the people before all else. And so if a government becomes destructive of its means, which is that primary role that I just said, then it is become destructive of its own existence. Therefore, it needs to be reformed and created anew. And that cycle, as it should have done numerous times, but had not been done, should have been recycled over and over again until it was figured out. Like, look, obviously this is insanity trying to do tyrannical or authoritarian shit. We probably shouldn't do this. And when it happens again, guess what? Recycle, rewash it, redo it. And look, the point that I'm going to go on finality, Mark, because we need to have a full episode on this specifically. And I think this is when I'm gonna kind of just
are you about to do a spoiler? Are you about to do a spoiler?
A mild spoiler. Okay. But look, I may be able to get Michael Bolden from the 10th Amendment Center on here. We're working on trying to do that. And this is a conversation we're going to go down a lot more. But where I want to go with this in finality, Mark, is we're talking about China buying up land. We're talking about all this. And I know this has been mildly profanity laced, but who delegated the authority to the government to sell our land? Who delegated the government the authority to come and tell us we need to kill our animals and we need to destroy our crops and we need to do this and we need to do that?
Yeah. Who gave them the authority to change our industry? Like,
Mark, who delegated somebody the authority to be like, hey, Mark, you owe us a cut of what you make because you simply own a business. You need to pay us royalties for having your home. I'm here to tell people, when you have to pay a government royalties or taxes for owning your own home, you know who owns that home? Not you.
Not
You're
you.
paying rent. And so in the end of the day, why have we not, and people say, oh, well, taxation is the reason we split from Britain. There's 27 separate grievances as to why we did that. Okay, you can go read it. It's in the Declaration of Independence, and a lot of them were harboring troops, abuses, wrongful pursuance of justice and law, being literally shot in the middle of the street, for God's sakes, were a number and only a handful of these things. All the things, if you read the 27 separate grievances of the Declaration of Independence and you look at what's going on today, it is a fucking replica of what happened back then. We are being aggressed in the exact same manner, and nobody wants to say it, but it's by our own government. And
So,
look,
and
we
just
need
real
to
quickly,
take charge. We need to go on the offensive because we've been defending it too long, and we have to do it in many, many ways. And I believe that it can be done, but we've got to value our liberty and our rights before anything else, and work within our communities. Otherwise, it's never going to work. So on that, I leave you the floor for now.
Well, so here's the sticky booger, on the finger here. It's like we're at 2 hours right now, and I feel like if we continue down this road, because I know there's things I want to say in response to you, especially when it comes to what we are supposed to do. Like, what is the next step?
Yeah,
I feel if we go down that, this is going to be a 3-hour podcast.
Well,
I don't know if that's fair to any of the viewers. I don't know if that's Blackbeard.
This is what our government
actually, chime in. We're like, are you guys done? Toxic waste. Nice.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to do here. I mean, it's a little bit longer than we normally do. I kind of feel like I need to cut it off. But Jeremy, you just brought up some great points, and I know you and I feel very strongly about this, and I know I really want to get that message out. It's like, no, now more than ever, you better be speaking out. Now more than ever, you better realize the fight that you're in, because you are in a war right now. And now more than ever, you better why are American businesses overseas? Why are we as consumers?
Why are we overseas to begin with?
So I'm hesitant. I think we need to nip that in the bud. I want to give Blackbeard, last kind of thoughts. Yeah. Jeremy, before I bring it over to Blackbeard, let me just kind of spool you up here real quickly. Are we going to do a giveaway this episode? Yes or no?
I do have my question.
You do have your question?
I do have my question. So at the end of it, I will pose the question, and we'll put a little note, down and below, kind of where they can find it. Because I understand people have lives and they're busy and stuff like that. So, if they make it through part of it and they don't happen to see it, then we'll put something down.
Well, and I'll put something in the descriptor too, to make sure that people. So here we go. And for ending this, it's going to be a giveaway episode. Yep. You've got your question. Again, it's based on whoever answers it, as Jeremy thinks is most appropriately. So Jeremy, you can do that on the outro right before you do your outro. But for right here, right now, Blackbeard, thank you for being so patient. Well, not even just being patient, but dude, you just jumped in, kind of ad hoc, and you've added so much to this conversation. Matter of fact, I actually think the whole language thing got us so sidetracked, but it's such a great fucking, it's such a good story.
And to go in just to spool Blackbeard up real quick, you don't comply your way out of tyranny. It doesn't work that way. So more compliance does not equal a better life. And I think that goes kinetic. I think that goes language. I think it goes culture. I think it goes everything else. So hopefully I gave you enough.
Jeremy,
to go off of Blackbeard.
And Jeremy, to that point, like you talked about a couple, it's the same thing on language. You cannot, if you give away some of your freedoms on the language side of things, that doesn't make the world get better. That actually makes the world get worse. So Blackbeard, your closing thoughts are, chime in on whatever you want to talk about. Take as much time as you want, but what are your final thoughts on this? Again, the whole point of tonight's podcast was supposed to be, we're at war. I was going to try to make this more well-rounded argument that we're at war. I think we got I don't think it's actually got sidetracked. I think my mind got opened through our conversations with everybody tonight, and I realized like I don't even understand the level of warfare that we're actually existing in right now, and language is a big part of that, and that's kind of your something that you're really good at it. So where do you want to go, sir? You want to respond to anything directly? You just want to take your time and make your own comments? What do you want to do?
Yeah, I'll probably just I'll quote this here and see what comes to mind. But this is from the film adaptation of Alan Moore's V for Vendetta. And it says,
Love
and the
that
truth
movie.
is, and the truth is, there is something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there? Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression. And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission. How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just say that it is.
Hey, can I ask you to do this real quickly? Can you just? I'm going to bring it up to a different view. Can you actually read that again? And I didn't know you were going to read that. So I'm kind of a comic book. I'm a little. There's a part of me that's a nerd. I'm a geek. I love Star Wars. I love comics. I mean, I grew up with that stuff as a kid. I unfortunately have lost it, but I had original copies of the comic books, not the big book, but the actual individual comic books of V for Vendetta. I love that fucking movie. I love what you just did. I did not know you were going to do that. Could you please read that whole thing again and say it loud, sir? It's such a poignant,
Yes,
just so profound. Please do that again.
It says, and the truth is, there is something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there? Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression. And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission. How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror.
yes, and that plays right into what I was saying, because it's one of those unyielding truths, right?
It's the little things, believe it or not. We all think it's the big things, but it's in the day-to-day things. Like, I mean, oh, you want to come in here and pick up your prescription? We'll put on your mask. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to
really
post something
simple.
for your business on YouTube? Well, then you got to do the proper hashtag or whatever the key. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And
I was just going to say real quick to play right into what you're saying, Blackbeard. There's that realm of tolerance, and Mark, you've brought up tolerance and in the tolerant left as well before. But look, tolerance is not without its limits. Okay, tolerance is simply how much you're willing to take until you refuse to deal with it anymore. And now we've been provided in society this idea of an unlimited amount of tolerance, and it's like, that's not what tolerance is. You don't have tolerances for metal and tolerances for other products that go unlimited. I mean, everything has a melting point, right? There's a melting point at which something has. There's a reason it's called the tolerance for how much you can take. It's not, oh, you're just going to tolerate this until we decide you're not going to take it anymore. No, like, and that's what these people want. And again, it plays and it factors right into what Mark has said and what Dave has talked about and what Blackbeard has talked about. Because look, in the end of the day, tolerance is not meant to be unlimited. And even those who preach tolerance the most are some of the most intolerant bastards ever. So,
right.
That's all I just wanted to say is in that.
But damn right, you're absolutely fucking straight away. Matter of fact, let's bring it over to Blackbeard. But as we're making that segue, no, you nailed it right there, Redbeard. I mean, like straight up, some of the most intolerant motherfuckers out there are the people who are preaching for tolerance, and
Yes.
they are the most. Oh God, and it's so self-evident. Blackbeard, I don't know if you want to take that from a linguistics perspective, but like, because again, that's kind of like a little bit of a. It ties into propaganda and wordsmithing, and again,
Yeah.
you're the smither of words here, sir.
I hear the hammer striking.
Yeah, seriously. Is there something you can? Where do you want to go with this? Again, we're kind of wrapping this up, but like, take it. If you don't want to address that, go wherever you want to go. You got the floor, sir.
Well, I mean, I think you've really covered what needs to be said. I don't have anything more to add.
You've got some pearls of wisdom. Come on.
Mark is reaching into your soul for it.
Jeremy just made the striking motion of like an anvil, a hammer. Like, is that really what it is right now? Is it as simple as that? Again, going back to the comment. Here, I'm sorry. I'm gonna give me a second to change the view. Is it like, again, you're reading from that that graphic novel, right? Became a movie. We're talking about that, and that kind of got us spun up on this whole concept, right? But it ties into everything else that we've talked about tonight. And, again, the ultimate, bringing it back from a college perspective, the argument was we're already at war. I didn't do a very good job of laying out that argument because there were so many, too many interesting sidebars tonight. One of them was language. And here you are. And you know more about language and semantics than anybody else I know, period. Seriously. So, and then you brought up that quote from the, Moore's graphic novel. Again, watch the movie. For anybody who's watching this or listening, seriously, just even go watch V for Vendetta. Again, it's Hollywood, and yeah, it's not as good as the comic book, but it's still a pretty goddamn good movie. I mean, and matter of fact, I think honestly, Blackbeard, I think they did justice to that quote. I think they made that quote the exact line for line in the movie. But if you want to extrapolate upon that and take it to the level or the next level where you might want to take it, please go ahead and do so. I think you've just got so much more to add to this. I now more than ever, because we are at war right now, I think people need to start waking up and hearing these things and starting to realize that there's actually 6 trees out there, not 3. You got to be looking a little bit harder.
One thing I would say is that if we go back to the idea of the trivium and logic, grammar, and rhetoric, what that can afford us to do, and I'm not claiming that I'm even half as well versed in it as I ought to be, but I recognize that what it can allow us to do is to say we can find enjoyment and we can have our perspectives expanded by listening to 3 people on a podcast talking about the way that they look at things. But ultimately, the decision about something as ostensibly covert as whether or not we're in war right now is up for you to decide, because no war's been declared. And so it's the responsibility of every person here saying, like, if that is the case, and if things seem to be going downhill, well, then what do I have to actualize in my own life to prepare for what's coming? Because, the way I look at it, honestly, is I understand the frustration. I do. I'm an American. I was raised here. I've lived here my entire life. I think it's a great country in spite of all the problems that we have. I think it's always been worth defending. And I just think that sometimes it's difficult to go. I just think that it's a little, we're very long in the tooth here, honestly. I think that I think the ship's sinking, and I don't know that the breach in the hull can be welded back together. And so the question is are there lifeboats that I can commandeer? And after it sinks, can I make it to shore and build a new boat? I think that's where we're at, honestly. And it doesn't bring me pleasure saying that. I find no pleasure in that at all. But if you want my honest opinion, I think that's where we're at.
All right. Well, here's how the podcast is going to get just a little bit longer. I'm high-fiving you, sir. Again,
Yeah.
I've never had a beer with you in person, and I hope I really hope that I have that opportunity to do so sometime in life, because I think what you just said, I mean, like, I'm getting choked up. We're in trouble. I couldn't agree with you anymore. Like, again, we're at war. That's my argument. Somebody could say, well, no, we're not. Okay, well, only one of us can be right. Somebody's going to be wrong. But to that point, I really hope I'm the one who's wrong. I really do. But to you, the point you just made there, Blackbeard, I unfortunately think that it's the me, you, and Redbeards in life right now. It's our generation, right? You know, I'm older than the two of you, but we're all in that same little timeline, right? I don't expect to see Social Security. I don't expect to see my military retirement. I don't expect to see any of that stuff. I think I'm going to suffer. I'm 55 years old and I'm physically broken from all the shit I've done in my life. And I don't think I'm going to really get anything out of this. I think it's going to be a tough life from here on out. It's only going to get worse. I think the best that I can expect and I can hope for in my life is an Obama era economics. And if you were alive during that period of time, it sucked. It was almost no different from where we are right now. I think that's the best that we in our generation, the three of us, people like us. I think that's the best we have available to us. However, I think if our generation, the three of us, this podcast, you know, who we are as people, if we speak out and take the fucking punches and absorb some of the pain, then that generation of people who, you know, whatever, 18, 16 to 25, you know, that little group of people right now, I think there's more and more humans who are waking up to, like, this isn't the way it's supposed to work. This is wrong. And this is broken. So if the three of us, and I've got actually scars on my body from actually doing this. If the three of us can, if we're the ones who fall on the barbed wire so other people can run over our bodies and get in the trenches and win the fight, that's pretty much that's the best we have to look forward to in our lives right now. I know that's a sad thing to say, but because I think we're at war. I think we are at a war we don't even know we're in. And for us, whether we want to be combatants or not, it doesn't matter. We are combatants. We are in this war, and there's going to be pain and suffering. And if any of the three of us make it out of it, it's going to be Obama era economics, and, you know, which sucked. But if we stay true and if we hold the course, the generation or two behind us can right the ship, can make it better. And America can. Matter of fact, I honestly, personally, got a glass half full. You know, I think America will come out better and stronger. And if we win, if we're successful, then the world will be a better place, because America will actually become America again. And Jeremy, I'm turning that over to you, because I know what I'm talking about. We have a younger generation that is more, again, that Gadsden Flag kid, God bless him and his family, you know, like, and matter of fact, I just got to throw out a plug for Paul. You know, he's been on our podcast before. Send me an email. Dude, he's absolutely right. Everybody's missing the point. Like no, that's so I don't want to see. I'm hesitant. I want to talk about this, but I know I can't, because we're already like 2 hours and almost 30 minutes into the podcast.
And I only have something short to add to that. And I had to write it down because otherwise I would have forgotten what it was. But it's essentially this, Mark. It should be expected of no man to tolerate or endure in unlimited capacity that which may injure, abuse, and turn into monstrosity. Opposite from divine natural origin, rights, and liberty.
Who said that?
I did.
You said that?
Yep.
Oh, dude, that's fucking badass. All right, you got to email me that. That'll be on the ticker in the future. That's pretty badass. All right, how about this, guys, boys? Seriously, we're at 2 hours and 24 minutes. It's a long podcast, and for anybody watching this or listening to it, I mean, sorry, not sorry. These were the things that needed to be said. These are the conversations that I personally believe. I can't speak for Jeremy. I can't speak for Blackbeard. I'm only saying this for me. My God, if we're not having these conversations on a near daily basis, if you and I are not willing to stand up and fight these fights, then there is no future for us. Because I already think even if we stand up and fight these fights, there's actually probably not much of a future for us anyway. But it's for the future of the people who come behind us that can make this better, that can make this who we are supposed to be. That's why we do this. That's why we need to once more into the breach.
Yeah.
Blackbeard, what do you got to say, sir?
I would just say that this whole thing, when I look at it through a supernatural lens. I see forces at work that are beyond the material and the ordinary. I think that what's arrayed against us is bigger than the faces that we see on television. But I think that what's for us is also greater. I think that there is an overarching plan and that we're not alone, and that even if our life is to suffer an extent, I mean, life is suffering. It's not only that, but it is that, and
but that is a huge facet of life, isn't it? I mean, suffering.
Oh, huge.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
But what we can do, assuming that, because if they look, if a nuke goes off, in the city and I'm here, it's like, well, okay, that was my run. But, assuming that we make it through these times, what we can do is in whatever remains, we can provide a vision for the future that the posterity that will come to follow us will be able to prosper in. And that's happened before in history, and it will happen again.
Well, I mean, I don't think anyone would argue with that. It will happen again. I think the real question boils down to then, I'm not trying to ask you for the ultimate answer, but okay, in your opinion, well, then how do we get there? So tying it in with this episode, we're at war. I think we're at war. I think we're in a war, and most of us just don't even know. We don't even realize it. We're not willing to see it because we think there's 3 trees in the forest and there's actually 6. It's that kind of moment. So on that note, last comment or last kind of question for you. So then how do we overcome that? How do we as a people then, in your opinion, Blackbeard, how do we overcome that? How do we move forward and be better?
Sometimes if you look at an Eastern philosophy of combat, and I'm speaking metaphorically here, but it's the idea that instead of always resisting a force, you allow the force to act upon itself. So you turn it upon itself in a sense. Well, in a way, what's happened is that all of civilization has been concentrating and getting larger and getting larger and getting larger, and requiring ever more laws and ever more financial structures to keep the whole thing glued together. And now they're, still going for this even greater centralization. And I don't think that is sustainable, honestly. Even if they get it for a time, it will collapse under its own weight. It just isn't. It's too inverted in relationship to the natural world. And so some of the solutions that we have is that after it collapses under its own weight, we can go back to living the way that we're designed to live, more locally in tighter communities with greater responsibility for the necessities of our lives. And then we can reconnect with the spiritual nature of the world. And I really am kind of optimistic about that. Like, I really think like it won't be as materialistic. It won't be as, it won't be the life that we grew up in, but it might be an awfully lot more meaningful life.
I'm here to tell you right now, sir, that was if I was smart enough to figure out how to make the clips, I would have made a clip out of what you just said right there, because I couldn't agree with you anymore. I'm not black-pilled. I'm hopeful. I think what you just said, I think we're gonna have to get punched by Mike Tyson a couple more times. But once, yeah, and again, the me and yous, we may see this tangentially at the end of our lives, but the younger generations coming behind us, they could actually live and grow up and experience what you just said right there, and that would be a much better world. I totally love that, what you just said.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Blackbeard. All right, we're at, there it is. The ticker I just looked up. We're at 2 hours. I almost said 2 minutes. We're at 2 hours and 30 minutes. One of our longest fucking podcasts ever. I don't know. What do you guys think? Should we take it out right now? Or Blackbeard, you want to add some more to this? I mean, seriously, dude, you just juiced me up right there. I fucking love that last comment you just made. I love it.
I think that it would be a good thing, because it's easy to point out all the problems and dwell on them because they're so in our face and they're so intense. But I think it'd be good to have a podcast where we really think and come up with some real, like positively oriented solutions about things, because, whatever you focus on grows, even if only in your own mind. And I really do think that there are peaceful and positive solutions that are possible. And sometimes, if the car is barreling toward the median and you don't think you can stop it, well then how do I get that person out of the car? I got to pull mine over, and it's in the midst of tragedy that we can make the conscious choice to reorient our vision towards building when everybody else is looking at destruction.
Okay, so here's the deal, boys. Final comment from my side. You're absolutely right, Blackbeard. And Jeremy and I have talked about this a couple times. And again, we don't just want to have a podcast that just focuses on all the negative aspects. There has to be some kind of positive or resolution-based commentary in the podcast. How do we do better, right? And so when we do the AAR, if you're, Blackbeard, if you got the time to do an AAR tonight afterwards, let's sit and talk about that, and let's figure out how we can make that a future podcast. Because I totally agree. Let's have a much more solution-based. I mean, Redbeard, does that make sense to you? I mean, Are you just, what do you think?
So I think having something solution-based is good. I think the struggle with many people is it requires people to actually do something, because it's until something happens, it's all bluster. I do think it would be good. But in the end of the day as well, I think it bears to have a realistic purview for ourselves that we can also talk at the possible solutions ad nauseum. But at what point do we give ourselves a semblance of pause, if you will? And I'm all for it, but I think we should put it out there and not overdo it. The same as I think we try to do with our conversations. And I do see some detractions because we do cover some of the same things several times. But that being said, we also can't baby people and we can't handhold them. It's going to take work. We all know that it's going to take work.
Yeah.
You have to show up ready to work. And if you don't know what to do, ask somebody that does know what to do. I will shamelessly plug, look, if you don't know where to go to learn, go to the 10th Amendment Center. Go watch Chris Ann Hall. Go watch these people that have been doing this for a very long time. And honestly, listen to Judge Napolitano, listen to Ron Paul. These are all people who've been there doing this for a very long time. You can learn so much from these 4 areas. And if you
So,
walk away from there,
slow on. Then, therefore, say that again. Say, because I like some of those people I don't follow, but others I do. But I could not agree with you more. So say that again. Let's drive that point forward. Say it again.
No, it's if the primary sources, in my opinion, that will provide you the best information, and not only information, but dare I say, help you weaponize your information, is the 10th Amendment Center, Chris Ann Hall. You have Judge Andrew Napolitano. And Ron Paul is still very relevant for the work that he's done. Look,
and for the record, that's Redbeard's opinion. But I'm here to tell you, as a fellow
that's
human
my
being,
opinion.
like you have introduced me to 2 of those 4 people. Now,
and I
know, but I'm here to tell you.
And I've gone through Chris Ann Hall's offered education courses. She literally provides education resources that you can pay for. It's a very minuscule fee, and it opens an entire library. You pay a small fee once a month because it's how they help with their operations, right? And it's very transparent. But that fee it's a regular fee across the board. All the new content you're not paying extra for. You have access for like $10. All of this education they offer. It's like $10 or $15 if I remember correctly, and everything brand new that's coming up. And to not do it is, at that point, kind of dumb.
This isn't a plug. We're not plugging one company, or this isn't.
But it's somebody who's gone through
Jeremy's point.
Yeah.
So Jeremy and I have talked about Chris Ann Hall for a long time, and I actually just finally started watching some of her videos recently, and I'm like, holy shit, who the fuck is this girl? This girl is fucking spot the fuck on. So and you do you. Like if you want to go down Jeremy's road and you want to pay for that, whatever. You do you.
If you want to be better armed and being able to deal with this is where I'm telling you to go. If you don't want to,
because we are at war, Jeremy. You need to
use all your resources
with the proper ammunition and training to figure out how to fight
the
that
resources
war.
that are out there. Yeah. And look, I very much so. I would say, if I may be biased for a moment here, Mark, the 10th Amendment and Chris Ann Hall are the 2 premier resources that you can go to specifically for education, not only in the Constitution, but on liberty, rights, how to take it, exercise it, activate it, and get out there and do stuff with it. They are beyond amazing. They literally will do what I don't think that I'm capable of doing, which is they literally will walk you through the steps of how to start an organization of like-minded people to get out there and to affect change in your communities, in your states, and at a national level.
We're wrapping it up. How about this? Do you want to give the little spoiler, heads up? So I'm just going to say this. Jeremy turned me on to the 10th Amendment Center, and I'm here to tell you, I don't think he did a very good job of trying to describe who these guys are.
I'm addicted my comprehension.
I hate social media. Social media. I actually love social media for the 10th. Seriously, those guys are so fucking smart. I love it. So I'll have to put a link, Jeremy, in this video.
I'll give you the link to Chris Ann Hall stuff too.
But give a little spoiler for what you've been kind of working behind the scenes.
So
just let
slowly but surely, very briefly, I've talked to Michael Bolden of the 10th Amendment Center on and off for quite a while now. And I put the offer out to him, say, hey, this is what we're doing. Would you be interested in doing that? He messaged back basically, yeah, I would love to. So that may be coming near the end of September, possibly October.
Maybe.
So I don't want to I don't want to make a promise because you know, things change in people's schedules. He has a life. He has his own organization he runs. But
well,
I
he
am
might
going,
watch this episode and say, "You guys are fucking idiots," and I don't want to be associated with you. But like, you know, that could be the truth too, right?
Right. I mean, hey, fair play to him if that's the case, because I almost wouldn't agree. I almost wouldn't disagree with him to some extent.
I would actually refer to Blackbeard. I'd be like, "But hang on, we've got great guests.
Look,
Like,
we have smart
come on,
people
seriously."
here. It's not just us. But no, so that's what I'm working on. Hopefully, we'll be able to get that to work. And I will update Mark and you know, we'll put something out there just to, you know, in the next couple of episodes to kind of let you guys know where that's at. Beyond that, yeah. So that's something to look forward to. I really hope we can get them, because I have to say I'm going to be dramatically eclipsed by Michael Bolden if he comes on.
I'm here to tell you, I will be in a situation where I'm like, I don't even know how to.
I will be,
honestly, I'm looking forward to it because it'll be something that I've never been exposed to, and
I would almost feel.
But the bottom line is what we're really trying to say, and I will, if I can, if I figure it out, I'll make it in the video. I'll put a link. But you got to go check these guys out if you don't know who we're talking about.
Yeah,
they're just incredibly smart people.
I will feel almost intellectually impotent if we have him on.
Well, but here's my point. And honestly, and Blackbeard, just throwing this out there to you, like, you might want to be a part of that conversation, that episode, because 100%. These are just, you guys operate mentally. You operate at a different level. Like, look, I'm not blowing sunshine up your ass. Jeremy and I are more of doers. We're more of like, we're the guys who throw grenades and dig fucking trenches. You guys are like the more intellectual, smarter people who help us figure out how not to be fucking barbarians. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. So you might want to be a part of that conversation.
I would love to have you back for that.
Seriously. Would you be willing to do that, Blackbeard? What do you think?
Yeah. Just let me know.
He's so easy. He's like, Mark, just let me know. Throw me some free gear and I'll be there. Yeah, whatever.
He exists off of intellectual conversation alone. I don't even think he eats or drinks anything.
Well, seriously, have you seen him even go away from the camera to take a piss? I mean, like, seriously, I think he's a robot. Seriously. He's like, in all fairness, I actually like the newer Blade Runner, the 2024 Blade Runner with the robot, the AI. I think
all right, that's a wrap, everybody.
Yeah, I think Blackbeard is that. He's that AI robot. I think he is. He's just way too fucking smart for humanity.
I just have gone through the stages of grieving. I did it like 15 years ago. I got very angry. I was handing.
Well, you're being serious now, aren't you?
I was handing.
Shit. All right.
I was handing DVDs out to people. Right, just pedestrians, civilians, police officers. I mean, I'm not going to go into the whole history. Maybe in the after thing we can talk about it. But it's like, I had my moment to be angry, and I had my moment to despair. And that moment, those moments are done for me now, because I choose for them to be done.
Well, that is a very, I'm going to bring us back to this view. So that's actually a very, what's the word I'm trying to say? If you think of Marcus Aurelius, I mean, like, that's a very, why can't I think of the word all of a sudden? That's actually a very humanistic. That's how we should all look at things. We should all realize what you just said right there. Like, I was down this road because I allowed myself to be down this road. And then I made a decision. I said, I'm not going to go down this road anymore. I did not know that. Thank you for sharing. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. I'm high-fiving you.
So Mark, just a quick thing here before we wrap up. I almost think, because we're so long in the tooth, I may just post the. Should we just post the question? Because we can also post it in our episode as well on Spotify. Should we post the question underneath?
No, let's save it for the next podcast. So for the people who've either fast forwarded or stayed through to the bitter end, Now, let's just let people know next episode is going to be a giveaway. And so Jeremy's going to have a question.
Yep.
I've got a giveaway, and it's this awesome EDC
Honestly,
tray from, see it right there. Well, there we go. Right there. It's an awesome orange EDC tray.
Yep.
And this is from CountyCom again, and I'll put that link in the video. We've done this a couple times. That company has some pretty cool fucking gear.
I think so. Yeah.
If you're into EDC stuff. So we'll do that EDC tray in orange next episode. We may have lost Blackbeard, Jeremy. So how about this? Well, no, Blackbeard's back just in time. So Jeremy, let's just punt that until let's slide right on that until next time. This has been, as you said, we're long in the tooth this episode.
Yep.
I think this might be our longest episode ever. And
we're close.
That's a good thing or a bad thing, but
So
but why don't you just take us out? We'll do the giveaway next time. And before anyone kicks off, I mean, Blackbeard, seriously, thank you for joining tonight.
Yeah,
especially on spur of the moment. And thank you for just helping make all of us just smarter, better people, or
thank you for
if
making
nothing
me
else,
a little less
just
dumb.
to challenge us to be smarter and better people. You know, seriously.
I had to do something to lighten the mood a little bit. So thank you for making me a little less slow. Yeah. Keeping me intellectually on my
I was
toes.
making a really good statement, and then Jeremy just like had to throw his monkey wrench in there.
I fucked it up.
But it's a good monkey wrench. Yeah, you are a little bit less slow, Jeremy. You are correct.
A little bit less slow, a little bit more intellectually high speed. So I still leave the door open when I back up to the pump, so that rips off. But yeah.
Hey, okay, Redbeard, hang on one second. Blackbeard, final comments, sir. Whatever you want to say, it's up to you.
Just try to make the most accurate assessments that you can, and try to develop your own ability to think for yourself. I know that's kind of cliche to say, but it's like you posted a kind of nebulous question, because it's like, are we at war? Well, I mean, we're always at war with something, but I know what you mean when you say that. And it's just one of those things where if it isn't declared, then people listening, they might have families that they're responsible for, not even just yourself. And it's for them, it's important too. We have to think about the people in our lives. So just say, try to make an accurate assessment of your circumstances as you can, and try to focus on the things that are positive and right in your life, even when the circumstances are bad, because whenever you're on a positive foundation, it allows you a place to go. But if you allow yourself to spiral, even if it's justified, it may be totally justified, but even if it is, there's nowhere to go from there, not anywhere you want to go. So I would just say, work on developing that independent thought mechanism, be sober-minded, but, focus on what's right and what you can do and not what you can't influence.
Damn.
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty good. All right, Redbeard, take us out, sir.
All right.
I mean, I don't think there was a more sober outro right there than what Blackbeard just said. So,
and on that note, everybody,
honestly, I'm not sure who would win in an arm wrestling contest, Marcus Aurelius or Blackbeard. I'm not really 100% sure who's going to kick whose ass right there. I'm just throwing that out there. Redbeard, take us out, sir.
Yeah. And on that note, just remember, if I don't fucking choke on my piece of candy, god damn it. Just remember.
He's always eating, by the way, boys and girls. Every time I talk to him, when I call him, I'm serious. It's probably like 90% of the time when I call him and we're just, talking about things or discussing the podcast, the motherfucker is always eating. It's so weird.
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Well, go ahead. Enjoy your candy bar. Take us out. Take us out, sir.
On that note, everybody, look, greatly appreciate it. Blackbeard, thank you for coming on. And to Dave, if you happen to see this, almost 3 fucking hours of it, I apologize to you, but I don't at the same time. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of this. Without you guys, we couldn't do this. So it really does make a big deal, and especially to our guests.
Damn right.
We get that you guys take time out of your lives. Sometimes you get long in the tooth. Our after actions are kind of fucking crazy at times, but we really enjoy the time that you spend with us, and we really enjoy the camaraderie that you guys share with us, your intellect, your wisdom, and all of your points of view, because this is what it's about. So, so basically on that, thank you very much. And just remember that the flame of liberty shall not and will not ever be extinguished so long as there are good people that are willing to support and defend it. And on that note, as Mark has always said, you are the resistance, and that responsibility befalls you.
God, I love your outro, dude. Seriously, I love that whole. Oh, here we go, boys and girls. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so very much for joining us tonight. Redbeard, thank you. High five for that outro. Dude,
thank you.
It gets me every fucking time. Blackbeard, thank you for taking the time out of your life tonight.
Seriously.
On a small, out of nowhere, whatever. You know what I'm saying. Thank you very much, sir. I really do appreciate it. All right, everybody, boys and girls, we'll see you on the next episode. And hopefully we'll all be alive for that next episode. So, yeah. Woohoo. All right, be good.